Chapter 444. Pseudo-Dragon's Roar. As Wuming's voice fell, Wuming raised his hand, and a terrifying dragon breath burst out from the barrel in Wuming's hand. The huge dragon breath collided with the 6 incoming dragon breaths, and Wuming's pseudo-dragon's roar instantly engulfed them. Looking at Wuming's attack, the leading dragon spirit was instantly shocked, and at the same time, anger rushed to the dragon spirit's heart. That's Dragon Breath of Master Wuming. It's that damn Ji Kai. However, before the leader of the dragon elite could finish his sentence, he was engulfed in flames. The extremely hot dragon's roar's power did not diminish. It followed the direction of the 6 dragon breaths and instantly engulfed the 6 flying dragon shadows. After the 6 dragon spirits used Collapse Roar, their physical skills were quickly disintegrated, and the 2 sides were too close. The dragon spirits had no time to escape. Even if they escaped, with their bodies that had begun to collapse, they would not live long. In just a few breaths, the 6 powerful dragon spirits' attacks were disintegrated by Wuming, and not even ashes were left. This scene made the forest goblins, and other races widen their eyes. Even the superior life forms such as the Skywing, Fantasy, and Giant races could not wipe out the 6 dragon goblins in a few breaths of time while fighting alone. Only the Divine race, or the Kikai race that could replicate powerful attacks, could do it. Shankar saw Wuming's figure through the long-distance perspective magic, and his pupils shrank instantly. It's him. The captain of the forest spirit next to Shankar was also surprised. After all, when Wuming came to the forest spirit fleet, only Shankar and the captain saw Wuming's face. Looking at Wuming's Kikai race equipment, Shankar had already guessed the whole story. Wuming somehow managed to get his hands on a piece of equipment belonging to the mecha race. Using a method unknown to Shik, he was able to analyze and utilize that device. A few days ago, Wuming first, accidentally, broke into the goblins' territory, and then came to the forest spirit fleet, providing information to the forest spirits for free, probably for this moment. It was clear that the goblins had also come to Iliala because of silence methods, forming a tripartite balance of forces with the Skywings and the Forest Goblin Alliance. Later, Wuming used the Kikai race's weapon to simulate Skystrike and attack their forces and the Goblin fleet, causing the 2 sides to launch weapons against the Skywing race. In order to counterattack, the Skywing race also used their strongest move. As a result, the attacks from the 3 sides were inexplicably attracted to other places, and disappeared at a visible speed. There was no doubt that it was Wuming was behind it. Although they didn't know where their attacks disappeared, there was no doubt that it was not a good thing. Are the forest spirits ready to use the teleportation spell against the fleet? Because of the sense of crisis, Shankar had already ordered people to prepare the teleportation spell, ready to teleport the entire forest spirit fleet away. Yes. We're ready, and we're just waiting for your order, the captain said calmly as he saluted Shik. If you're ready, just activate it, you idiot. Shankar glared at the captain angrily. We're preparing to escape. Since we're ready, what are we waiting for? Do we want them to attack us? After all, we don't know Wuming's current situation, and we don't know if he's a friend or foe. Yes. Yes. I'll give the order now. The captain was surprised by Shankar's anger. This was the first time he had seen this lord angry. The captain left to inform the teleportation spell, while Shankar still stood at the bow of the warship, looking at Wuming, who was using the X-ray vision spell. How dare you toy with me, Shankar Nilbar, in the palm of your hand. Even if you're a god, wait for my revenge. After all, the Zeroth Ward of the Void that she, Hink Nilbarian, had developed was not for anything else but to slay a god. And the god that Hink Nilbarian wanted to slay the most was the creator of the forest elves, the forest god Canas. As long as there's no more Lord God, Nina and I can be together. Hee hee. Hee hee hee. Shankar's expression darkened. Accompanied by Shankar's laughter, the entire forest spirit fleet disappeared from the battlefield. At the same time, the goblin's magic airship had turned around. Intense flames erupted from the huge nozzle behind it. Then, the entire goblin fleet flew into the distance like a meteor shower. The fairy, dragon, fantasy, and giant species that had cooperated with the two sides were all dead. The fairy was in the forest spirit fleet, while the fantasy and giant species were behind the goblins. When they saw the goblins fleeing, they fled as well. Since their allies had fled, what was the point of them staying here? Thus, only the infant skywing species, fantasy breed Abondiheim, and Arthas, whose body was starting to fade, were left on the battlefield. Wyrm did not care about the forest spirits and goblins. After eliminating the dragon spirits, Wyrm landed on Abondiheim. In an instant, Abondiheim exuded a threatening aura, and the skywing, who had already turned into an infant, nervously looked at Wyrm, protecting his dying master. Now, no matter how stupid the skywing species were, they knew that their master, the most powerful war god Arthas, had been defeated, and the price was his life. "They're quite loyal to you, Arthas." Wyrm did not do anything but stood in front of Arthas and said in a light tone, "They are indeed a group of subordinates worthy of my trust. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to them in the past," Arthas said calmly. Wyrm and Artesius didn't look like enemies who had just fought to the death a few minutes ago. Instead, they looked like longtime friends. When Wyrm's son and Arthas's divine strike destroyed Wyrm's barrier and arrived at Arthas' temple, Wyrm's son had already overwhelmed Arthas's divine strike and destroyed Arthas's divine essence in the temple's throne. That's right, the reason why Arthas was unharmed after being hit by Wyrm's giant was because Arthas's divine essence was not in his body. Arthas was worthy of being called the strongest. To be able to keep his body from dissipating with his divine essence, it could be said that Arthas was truly the strongest in this world. Wyrm thought so. After that, Wyrm used the power of flood and annihilation to offset Wyrm and Arthas's attacks. After all, if the explosion caused by these two forces was allowed to continue expanding, not to mention whether the Skywings and Abondiheim, who were closest to the Artexia temple, would be able to survive, the planet would be bombarded with nuclear bombs again. Wyrm used the power of flood and annihilation at the same time. The all-encompassing water wrapped around the explosion. The power of annihilation annihilated these powers, but the price was that the two avatars were like the sun and the giant. They fell into a red state and could not be used. Then, the temple was destroyed, and Arthu and Wyrm came here from another dimension. The rest was what happened just now. Immediately, Wyrm said the key words. "Are you satisfied with this battle, Arthas?" Chapter 445. Are you satisfied with this battle, Arthu? Ha 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 ha. After Wyrm asked the question, Arthas started to laugh loudly. He laughed continuously. The Skywings were at a loss as to what to do as they looked at their somewhat crazy master before exchanging glances with each other. On the other hand, Wyrm didn't say anything and continued to laugh at Arthu. After a few minutes, Arthu stopped laughing and looked at Wyrm happily. "I'm very satisfied with this battle, Wyrm." Arthur's only wish was for someone to kill him and give him a defeat. "Since you can separate the divine marrow from your main body, why don't you store it somewhere else?" Wyrm asked. He had not properly protected his only weakness and had instead placed it in the most vulnerable place. No matter how he thought about it, it was somewhat abnormal. Arthur's temple was the battlefield between Wyrm and Arthu. Although the temple had initially been affected by the shockwaves from their battle, Wyrm had used the fact that the battlefield was too small to activate the inherent barrier of Nazalic. Wyrm did not think that Arthu was so wise as to predict that Wyrm would find Arthur's temple too small and hide his divine marrow in the temple's throne. Unless, of course, Arthu had chosen death. "When you came to this world, I already knew my end," Arthu calmly said as he began to tell a story. "I really don't know you, but the Starcup told me that if I were to fight you, you would be strong enough to kill me." Arthur's words left Wyrm puzzled. Starcup? Could the Starcup communicate with others? Was that not a scepter that represented the ownership of this planet? I'm not mistaken. That is indeed the Starcup, but that thing should be a replica or a clone of the Starcup because the real Starcup is still in the Elven Corridor. I can sense it. Arthu was a god born in the elven corridor where the star cup was born, so he naturally had the ability to sense the star cup's exact location, though it was very vague. It said that it could give me power. As long as I have it, I can defeat you. The method is very simple. I just need to choose it and hold it with both hands, Arthu continued. However, since Arthu said so, he definitely did not choose to accept the star cup's power. I didn't choose that thing's power. As a god of war, taking shortcuts is a disgrace to me. Knowing that he would be defeated and killed, choosing to live with the power given by someone else was extremely ironic to Arthu. My god essence wasn't taken out by myself and placed on the throne of the temple. It was taken out by the star cup. Arthu's words shocked Wyrm. Did the star cup come to life? After I rejected the star cup, I was ready to use my power to destroy it, but the star cup seemed to have been prepared for this. When I rejected it, it took advantage of my momentary distraction and drilled into the divine marrow in my body. Then, under my strong resistance, the star cup and my divine marrow were ejected out of my body. After that, the star cup sealed my divine marrow in the throne, and the star cup disappeared. Listening to Arthu's series of strange words, Wyrm was dumbfounded. This was really too strange. Logically speaking, the star cup was a lifeless symbol of the planet's power, so it should not have come to trouble Arthu without permission. However, Wyrm did not think that Arthu was lying, because Arthu did not know how to lie at all. He was a real man. However, this also explained why Arthu was not that strong when he fought Wyrm. In addition to hand-to-hand combat, magic battles, and ordinary chasing attacks, Arthu had also used his ultimate move, Divine Strike. No matter what, Arthu was recognized as the strongest. If that was all he had, it was unlikely that he would be known as the strongest in the world. It turned out that his divine marrow was a little affected. In other words, your true strength is actually more than that? Wyrm asked. Let's not talk about other things first. The divine strike just now was not much worse than when I was at my peak. Even if I was at my peak, I would have been defeated by you. Arthu was right. If Wyrm had not used Flood and Annihilation to eliminate the damage that he had sustained, Arthu would have been dead by now. Although Arthu was about to die, his body had now become extremely dim. Arthu also knew that Wyrm had shown mercy in the end, so he had let go of it now. Having an opponent that he could not defeat even if he used all his strength was quite a good feeling. This was what Arthu was thinking. Then, my friend, what do you think of my previous proposal? Arthu asked a strange question. Before coming out of the shattered alternate space, Arthu and Wyrm had a short conversation. Arthu had asked Wyrm to become the new god of the Sky Wings and Abantiheim. However, before Wyrm could reply, Arthu had been drawn out of the alternate space by the increasing spatial shattering and had arrived at Abantiheim. I accept. After all, Wyrm had already proven that Wyrm had agreed when he had destroyed those dragon spirits. Arthu smiled in relief. Ha ha ha. I have only lost once in 100 battles in my life. Meeting you is the happiest thing that has ever happened to me. Arthu was like an old friend to Wyrm, looking at Wyrm with satisfaction before disappearing. Goodbye, my friend. Wyrm watched Arthu disappear. Arthu, who had lost his god's vital spirit essence and had fought fiercely with Wyrm, was beyond saving. This was like a servant's spirit core. Once the spirit core was shattered, the servant would be forced to leave. There was no other way. However, there should be other ways, such as the Star Cup. However, Arthu had only lost once in 100 battles in this world. This was the path he had chosen, and Wyrm would not stop him. It had to be said that Arthas was a good friend. Between Silent Wonder and Arthas, it could be said that they had developed true feelings for each other. At this moment, Wyrm suddenly thought of a problem. There was a problem with the Star Cup, a huge problem that could threaten Artetheus. However, even if there was a problem with the Star Cup, the rules of its appearance should not have changed. The only thing left was the most powerful divine soul seed, or rather, the Star Cup piercing through the core of the planet. Now, The star cup was about to be released from the planet's core. You guys stay here obediently. Remember to dodge if there is any danger. After Wuming said that, he opened a black portal and instantly went in, leaving behind a group of Skywing infants who did not know what to do and looked at each other. Chapter 446. Moving forward in the timeline, Wuming's clone was using the greedy arm to absorb the attacks of the forest elves, goblins, and Skywing species. The body of Wuming's clone was collapsing at a visible rate, including the pitch-black demon-like greedy arm. After all, this was the ultimate move of the three forces, which was enough to kill a god. Being attracted by the pseudo-greedy arm created by Wuming, there was naturally a price to pay for absorbing it. In addition, Wuming was not a clone of his main body that was currently in the root, but a clone of a clone. Although his strength was still passable, he would not be able to withstand the Zeroth ward of the void of the forest elves, the marrow explosion of the goblins, and the Skywing species' collective pseudo-godly strike. The attacks of the three forces were transformed into an energy ball comparable to a large fireball, which was absorbed by Wuming's greedy arm. Because the forest elves and goblins were preparing to retreat, and the Skywing species were turning into infants, no one attacked Wuming, which also allowed Wuming to be at ease. Just like that, by the time the large energy ball was almost completely absorbed, the body of Wuming's clone was almost broken beyond recognition. The greedy arm on the left hand of the clone was already full of cracks, as if it would not be surprising if it shattered at any moment. Bang! Sure enough, the pitch-black greedy arm on Wuming's left hand shattered like a mirror, turning into specks of light that scattered into the air. Well. Fortunately, the desireless arm has already stored these attacks, so there's no need for them, Wuming's clone said weakly like a badly damaged puppet. Immediately afterward, the clone left like a spirit, turning into specks of magic particles starting from its feet and flying into the air with the magic particles of the greedy arm that had not completely dissipated. At the same time, in the southwest direction of the continent of Yar'ela, a white-haired man wearing a tattered brown cloak, a hood over his head, goggles over his eyes, and a scarf over his mouth and nose came out of a hidden underground cave. He was none other than Rick, who had snuck into the southwestern part of Yar'ela from Lucia. Because of Wuming's teleportation gate, Wuming only needed to make a trip here, then open the teleportation gate, and Rick could easily come over. Looking at his glove shining, Rick wore a glove on his right hand. It was a glove as beautiful as an angel, white and flawless. This was the twin item that complemented the pitch-black greedy arm, the desireless arm. Rick knew that this meant that Wuming had successfully absorbed the attacks of the three forces. This was Wuming's signal to Rick that he could take action. Then, let me end this war, Rick said in a heavy tone, as if he had taken on a heavy burden. Then, Rick raised his right hand and took out a gemstone with his left hand. It was a crystal that stored magic. He only needed to break it to release the magic within. After all, using the desireless arm required the release of magic. As a human of this world, Rick did not have the energy sprite of this world, nor did he have the magic that Wuming used, so he could not use the desireless arm normally. Wuming gave the crystal to Rick so that he could use it to release the desireless arm. Release, desireless arm. Rick roared and slammed the crystal into the desireless arm. As a counterfeit world-class item, the desireless arm had a rather powerful appearance. When the crystal was slammed into the desireless arm, there was no doubt that the crystal that stored magic was broken. The broken crystal turned into bits of flying debris and disappeared, and the magic in it had been absorbed by the desireless arm. Like a flame that got oil, the desireless arm instantly burst out a powerful airwave, and it began to emit endless white light. Rick looked at the desireless arm that was constantly emitting strong light and airwaves, and Rick remembered Wuming's words. The Villo said, imagine a strong penetrating force, and press the liberated desireless arm to the ground under your feet. The energy stored in the desireless arm will penetrate the Earth's core and make the elf corridor appear. In this way, the star cup will also appear. Rick looked at the light in his hand that would end everything and smiled bitterly. For peace, for the future of mankind, for everyone in the village, for his sister, for the followers who were willing to turn into ghosts, for all of this, Rick and even mankind had sacrificed a lot. However, this day had finally arrived. Rick put down the raised desireless arm, aimed at the ground, and prepared to press it down. At this moment, a dark space door suddenly appeared in the sky, and Wuming's figure appeared from it. Rick! Stop! There's a problem with the star cup. Wuming shouted at Rick. Rick's pupils shrank, and then he quickly stopped pressing his arm down. There's a problem with the star cup. Rick looked at Wuming worriedly. But before Wuming could explain, suddenly, a green figure rushed toward the defenseless Rick. Wuming reacted instantly, and Wuming instantly activated the Phoenix incarnation. Violent energy filled the Phoenix stone plate in Wuming's heart, turning it into a red alert state. If he didn't do this, Wuming didn't have the confidence to save Rick before the green figure. The green figure was too close to Rick, as if deliberately prepared. Poochie! Ugh! The sound of flesh being separated echoed, and Rick's muffled groan followed. Wuming grabbed Rick, and brought him to the side. The green figure held something in her hand, and came in front of Wuming. That thing was a pure white glove, like an angel's glove. However, there were traces of blood on the glove, which dyed the angel's arm red. On our side, Rick was sweating profusely. His left hand was hugging his only remaining right arm, and he was sweating profusely. That's right, the green figure took away the desireless arm along with Rick's right hand. At this moment, Wuming also clearly saw the green figure. The one who snatched Rick's arm was a female. She had long ears like the elves of the forest, and her golden hair reached her waist. Although her soft green clothes were a little conservative, they still couldn't completely cover her voluptuous and sexy body. Forest spirit? Rick looked at the woman in front of him with some resentment. No, I'm afraid that's the creator of the forest spirit, forest god Canis. After sensing the creature in front of him that looked like a forest spirit, Wuming was very sure that her aura was similar to Arceus. Without a doubt, this was a god. Forest god Canis? Rick clearly didn't expect that a small character like him would be targeted by a god. However, Canis is a bit strange. Wuming narrowed his eyes, and looked at Canis. Although it was indeed forest god Canis, right now Canis' eyes were lifeless, as if he was a puppet. Wuming more or less guessed the situation. At this moment, Canis grabbed the desireless arm, and pressed it to the ground. Boom! In an instant, a huge amount of energy burst out from the ground. Chapter 447. Boom! A huge amount of energy came from underground, and the ground where Wuming and Rick were was completely shattered. Wuming had no choice but to bring Rick into the sky. As expected, the target of the manipulated Canis was only Rick's right hand, or rather, whether it could pierce through the desireless arm in the Earth's core. Wuming said. At this point, Wuming could also understand that Canis must have accepted the temptation of the Star Cup, accepted the power of the Star Cup, and ended up being manipulated. On the way here, Wuming thought that the Star Cup had tempted Arceus. Although Arceus had rejected it, he was still tricked by the Star Cup. Then, wouldn't the Star Cup look for other divine seeds? The answer was no. Canis was the new divine seed that the Star Cup was looking for. After Canis accepted the temptation of the Star Cup took control of Caina's body and used him like a puppet. Its purpose was to save itself from the elf corridor. The Star Cup first looked for Arceus because he was the strongest war god, but because Arceus had rejected and wanted to kill itself, the Star Cup paid Arceus a price. Then, the Star Cup looked for Canis. And Canis was afraid of the horror of being killed, so he accepted the Star Cup's proposal and became the Star Cup's puppet. He was arranged to be next to Rick, and was ready to liberate the real Star Cup in the elf corridor. And when he saw Wuming stop Rick's action of piercing through the Earth's core, the enslaved Canis directly attacked, snatching Rick's right hand and the desireless arm in his right hand. That was the truth that Wuming saw through. What happened to the Star Cup? Wuming grabbed Rick and healed him. Then, he frowned as he looked down at the ground that was already rotten beyond repair. The ground was completely destroyed as if it was the epicenter of an earthquake. Originally, if Rick used the desireless arm, the energy of the desireless arm would only have a very small destructive power, but it would directly penetrate the Earth's core with a powerful penetrating force and make the star cup appear. However, the desireless arm technique used by Canas was quite crude. Not only had a portion of the energy leaked out, but it had also caused damage to the surface of the Earth. Furthermore, it hadn't reached the core of the Earth, so it could be said that it was quite a waste. However, since the other party was a god, ordinary judgment could not be used as a reference. Wuming frowned as he looked at the black cup-shaped crystal slowly rising from the ground that was still being destroyed. That was undoubtedly the star cup. However, there was indeed a huge problem with the star cup. The star cup shouldn't be black in shape, but a pure white and transparent cup-shaped crystal. Apart from that, Wuming also sensed a familiar aura, which originated from the black mud. I didn't expect that even this world would have this black mud. Wuming said solemnly as he looked at the black mud that was swaying inside the black crystal like black paste. Wuming said with a solemn expression. I should have known. How could a normal person's voice reach my ears in the space-time tunnel? Only the black mud, which also has the power of the origin, could transmit that voice to my ears. Wuming's analysis was correct. The reason why Wuming could hear Rick sigh in the beginning was all because of the black mud. The black mud was deliberately hidden in the elven corridor that was full of elves, so Wuming's perception couldn't take effect for a while, so he didn't sense the presence of the black mud. After attracting Wuming to this world, the star cup that was possessed by the black mud began to plan its escape as if it had its own consciousness. It punished Arthu who resisted it, controlled Canas who accepted it, seized Rick's right hand, and successfully liberated the star cup from the elven corridor. I was tricked. Wuming wasn't too angry. This was the power of wisdom. Wuming was quite impressed. Even Wuming didn't expect a star cup that had just developed its own consciousness to be so calculative. Let's leave here first, Rick. You'll only be a burden if you stay here. Wuming said to Rick, whose right arm had stopped bleeding. Rick looked at Wuming seriously, then nodded. He knew his own limits. Then, Wuming opened the portal and sent Rick in. Before he left, Rick reminded Wuming. Thank you very much for your help, Lord God. I wish you all the best. With that, Rick threw himself into the black portal. Then, the portal closed. Wuming looked at the star cup's position. Just like a strange phenomenon, the liquid in the star cup flowed out directly and wrapped around the star cup to form a human figure. Then, the human figure took shape and appeared in front of Wuming. 18 pairs of white wings, Western clothing that resembled a Greek style, sharp eyes, and a muscular body. There was no doubt that this human figure was the god of war, Arthu, who had just died not long ago. However, Wuming wasn't stupid enough to think that this fake guy in front of him was Arthu. Although the appearance was the same, the aura was completely different. Oh, are you the dragon of origin? What a familiar stranger, Arthu said in a frivolous tone. There was no doubt that this wasn't Arthu. It's all thanks to you that I could come out so quickly, Arthu, who was formed by the star cup's consciousness, said. If it weren't for Wuming, it would have taken a year and a half for the star cup to come out. After all, even in the final battle, Rick had to use other means to penetrate the core. Without Wuming, this time would have been delayed. You know what you are, don't you? Wuming looked at the fake Arthu in front of him seriously. Of course. I'm the star cup's consciousness. I'm just a tool, an item. I belong to whoever wins the battle, the star cup's consciousness said frivolously, using Arthu's appearance. This annoyed Wuming. It was an insult to the dead. But thanks to this, I have my own consciousness. The star cup's consciousness smiled proudly. Then, it raised one of its hands, and countless black substances appeared on its hand. This was the black origin soil that Wuming was familiar with. If it's you, you must recognize this as well. This thing tells me that you're an enemy. The star cup's consciousness smiled at Wuming. Wuming closed his eyes, then let out a long breath. This was a little troublesome. Wu Ming had thought about what would happen if the big shots of each world were swallowed by the black origin soil. Although Xingchui wasn't considered a big shot, Xingchui had developed a consciousness after being corroded by the origin black mud that came out of nowhere. However, this was nothing. In the hands of a good person, the black origin soil was a good thing. In the hands of an evil person, the black origin soil was an evil thing. The consciousness born by the star cup was something similar to the world's consciousness. However, these people or things affected by the black origin soil would regard Wu Ming as an enemy. Just like Xiao Ming, who traveled to various worlds but was regarded as a world destroyer. The star cup's consciousness and Wu Ming had a hostile relationship. In short, only one of us can live. Wu Ming looked at the star cup's consciousness. There's no other way. My heart tells me that I have to kill you. Chapter 448. Then, let's cut the crap and get started. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, the magic power in his body erupted, creating a strong hurricane that blew against the land that was already damaged beyond repair. The huge magical power directly caused the sky and earth to change. Large dark clouds formed a cloud tornado that slowly floated above Wu Ming's head. I will deny the sky, deny the earth, the storm will destroy everything, and the rain will cover everything. With this supreme divine power, I will make everything in heaven and earth bow down to me. Wu Ming raised one hand and pointed to the sky. As he chanted, the huge cloud tornado in the sky began to roar along with the hurricane, forming a tornado that could tear steel. Ha! Wu Ming shouted and swung his raised arm down heavily. In an instant, a gigantic tornado followed Wu Ming's hand and smashed toward Artemis, who was formed by the consciousness of the star cup. Rumble. The tornado collided with the earth and burst out like a big explosion, instantly filling the air with smoke and dust. Whoosh, a winged silhouette flew out of the smoke. It was the star cup's consciousness that was using Artetha's appearance. Artemigio, who rushed out of the smoke and dust, was in a mess, as if he had rolled several times on the ground. However, although he looked embarrassed, Wu Ming was sure that he did not hurt Artemigio. I didn't expect you to have such powerful power. You really deserve to be called the Root Dragon. Artemigio looked at Wu Ming with admiration. I still have a lot of tricks up my sleeve. I'm afraid you won't be able to enjoy them. Wu Ming also looked at Artemigio. Now, half of Wu Ming's 12 avatars could not be used because of the previous battle and various other things. Wu Ming used Gargantuan to attack Artemigio and destroyed his heart. Sun collided with Artemigio's Skystrike. Flood and Annihilation were used to offset the aftermath of Wu Ming and Artemigio's ultimate move. Wu Ming used Phoenix to save Rick. It could be said that Wu Ming's usual abilities were basically unusable for the time being. However, the remaining 7 avatars were not his usual abilities, and it was enough to make Artemigio suffer. Dragon Seed, Warrior, Vitality, Storm, Ally, Thunder God, and Sorcerer. In addition to Dragon Seed, Vitality, Sorcerer, and Sorcerer, which were semi-passive abilities, whether it was Warrior, Storm, or Thunder God, their power was immeasurable. However, who has obtained Artemigio's body, is not to be trifled with. Artemigio's face instantly became ferocious, and then Artemigio's body rushed straight toward Wu Ming. All evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now I will have the majesty of 10 mountains, the power of 100 rivers, and the strength of 1,000 dragons. The majestic me will raise the fierce mark of the dragon seed. After Wu Ming finished chanting, the stone plate with the dragon carved on it suddenly lit up in his heart at 1:00. Then, Wu Ming's body suddenly agitated, and Wu Ming's body became bigger, and he also faced Artemigio's consciousness. Boom! Wu Ming and Artemigio's consciousness collided, making a loud noise, and the whole land made a miserable sound. It could be said that now, in the southwest of Yar'ela, the place where Wu Ming and Artemigio's consciousness fought was almost sinking. More than 1,000 meters of smoke and dust filled the air. Then, Along with the sweeping of a hurricane, the surrounding dust dissipated, and Artemisia's consciousness lowered its arm that released the hurricane. As expected of the root dragon. To think that you can contend against me in such a situation. The consciousness of the star cup that was using Artetha's appearance showed a rare serious expression instead of the frivolous expression it had before. You're not only using Artemisio's appearance, but you're also using his abilities, right? Wu Ming's voice sounded from the surrounding dust. Wu Ming sensed that the other party was using the same move as Artemisio. If it weren't for the fact that Wu Ming clearly knew that the other party was Artemisio's consciousness, perhaps he would have thought that Artemisio and Wu Ming were fighting. Of course. Artemisio is dead and has returned to the elf corridor. I happen to need a strong body, and it's all thanks to you that you were able to kill Artemisio. After the death of a living species in that world, they would return to the elf corridor. It felt like hell, but it was not quite the same. After Artemisio disappeared, he came to the elf corridor. As a result, Artemisio was swallowed by Artemisio's consciousness in the elf corridor. Wu Ming even suspected that Artemisio's spirit essence had been invaded by Artemisio's body. After being rejected, Artemisio's spirit essence was pulled out. Although it seemed to be placed there, in fact, Wu Ming felt that Artemisio's spirit essence was a means to pave the way for Artemisio's body. As Artemisio's consciousness, it didn't have a physical body, so it could only find a body that matched its identity, which was the body of a divine seed. That was why Artemisio's consciousness could use the defective product that was more powerful than the real one. That was because of Artemisio's power and the power of the root black mud. And the most important thing was Wu Ming's current incarnation, Dragon Seed. A huge, both ferocious and holy white dragon claw stretched out of the smoke, giving the feeling that it could kill Artemisio with just a light squeeze. The huge figure in the smoke shook, and in an instant, a huge white dragon appeared in front of Artemisio's consciousness. That was the power of Dragon Seed, which could turn him into a real fantasy breed dragon. The current Wu Ming was different from his previous incarnation. Originally, the dragon that Wu Ming transformed into was just a kind of dragon in name, but in fact, it was not a dragon. It was just like the golden wolf Bio in the Night of the Sorcerer. It was a wolf, but it was not a wolf. In addition, Wu Ming's dragon seed incarnation had undergone various baptisms for a long time, and the dragon that he transformed into was no longer an ordinary fantasy breed. At least, it was at the level of the fantasy breed king. Feel the power of my incarnation, Wu Ming shouted, and then Wu Ming's huge dragon claw slapped Artemisio's consciousness. At the same time, Artemisio's body, which was controlled by Artemisio's consciousness, frowned a little uncomfortably. Although Artemisio's body could not be seriously injured, it was still the strongest war god so far. Artemisio's physical ability could fight with Wu Ming barehanded in his current state. Wu Ming now understood why the other party had sealed Arthas's god essence in the throne of the war god temple. Arthas had probably died so that the Star Cup's consciousness could take over his place. This was also part of the other party's plan. I'll let you have a taste of the power of war god in his strongest state. Artemisio's consciousness roared and slammed into Wu Ming's dragon claw. Boom! Chapter 449. In the southwest corner of the continent of Yar Ayla, what was originally a wasteland had turned into a broken wetland with water constantly flowing in. The reason why the water entered the ground was because the battle between Wu Ming and the consciousness of the Star Cup that was using Arthas' body had caused 2, 3, 4, 5 damages to the ground that was originally penetrated by Desireless Arm. Above the wetland, 2 figures, one big and one small, quickly passed through the sky. They were Wu Ming, who transformed into a dragon, and Artrius, who was controlled by Star Cup. At present, Wu Ming was chasing after Artrius. Wu Ming raised his huge dragon mouth, aimed at the white figure in front of him, and condensed a platinum flame in his mouth, and then he blasted it out. Boom! The flame that seemed to be able to burn everything flew in the air at an extremely fast speed, and the air seemed to be burned, bursting out with a loud explosion. Whoosh! The consciousness of the Star Cup hurriedly dodged, and the exploding white flame directly passed by it and landed on the ground. Boom! A small mushroom cloud rose into the air, setting off a violent hurricane. Star Cup's consciousness was not to be outdone. It pointed at Wyrm with both hands, and two condensed skystrike energy beams were blasted toward Wyrm. Wyrm's huge body at the moment was not suitable for dodging, and Wyrm was not prepared to do so. Boom! Boom! Wyrm's two huge white dragon claws slapped the two incoming skystrike energy beams, and the two skystrike energy beams were directly sent flying. The energy pillar became like a hard object instead of an energy that would explode upon contact. It was sent flying by Wyrm. Boom! The skystrike energy beams, like Wyrm's white flame, fell heavily to the ground, and burst out with a roar, accompanied by a whistling hurricane, and two small mushroom clouds rose slowly. Now, it was almost possible to understand why the battle between the two could destroy the southwestern part of the continent of Yar into a wetland that was close to a new lake and ocean. Gaia couldn't withstand an ordinary attack even if it was a nuclear attack. Wyrm used his dragon seed avatar and fought with Star Cup's consciousness for a few minutes. In just a few minutes, the southwest of Yar was destroyed like this. Whether it was Wyrm in his dragon seed avatar state, or Artreus, who was controlled by Star Cup's consciousness, it could be seen that those two were not ordinary at the moment. First of all, Artreus's body and ability was controlled by Star Cup's consciousness. It could be said that Artreus was completely different from when he fought with Wyrm. Ahem, well, he was not the same person. Previously, Arthur's spirit essence had been sucked out by the Star Cup. No matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be that strong. But now, the Star Cup's consciousness that was using Arthur's body was able to fully display the strongest ability of the war god Artu. Not only could he use Heavenly Strike at will, but he also had the assistance of Star Cup and Black Root Mud, so his energy was unlimited, and his physical strength was also extremely strong. He could fight with Wyrm in his Dragon Seed avatar state for a while. It was worth mentioning here that Wyrm and Star Cup's consciousness were fighting in close combat before. However, Star Cup's consciousness found that its attack couldn't cause any significant damage to Wyrm, so it became a long-range battle in the air. That was because of Wyrm's first avatar, Dragon Seed Avatar. Originally, this avatar only gave Wyrm the ability of a top-level fantasy-type dragon, as well as an extremely powerful body and the ability to kill dragons. However, whether it was the dragon or the powerful body, Wyrm's original body was stronger than this avatar. That was why Wyrm didn't often or basically didn't use this avatar. It was only useful against dragon agents, but the chance of encountering a dragon was too small, and the chance of encountering an enemy related to a dragon was too small. In that case, wouldn't this incarnation be of little value? The answer must be no. Let's digress first. In theory, the God Slayer won't lose. The God Slayer was a creature that could win even when the winning rate was only 0.001%, and even in a battle where there was no chance of winning, it could still find a way to win. Of course, that was only in theory. If the God Slayer really didn't lose, then there wouldn't be Wyrm defeating Marquis Warban, Salvatore, Luo Hao, and so on, and there wouldn't be the last king slaughtering the ancient God Slayer. The main reason was that the God Slayer had infinite possibilities. And because of that, none of the God's powers seized by the God Slayer were useless. The God Slayer's power could be continuously developed by the God Slayer, unlike the fixed usage in the game. For example, Salvatore Anthony had the power to regress the technology in a circle centered around him. In the sphere of influence of that power, electrical appliances would be inexplicably cut off, mobile phones would be unusable, and vehicles such as cars and ships would be completely paralyzed. That was because Salvatore didn't use that ability much, and he didn't develop it much. If that ability was a little more ruthless, the technology would regress tens of thousands of years and cover the entire Earth, then the Earth would be finished in less than a few minutes. Therefore, no one should underestimate any power. After Wyrm studied the Dragon Seed's power, he came up with some ideas. Dragon Seed's avatar was evolved from Camel's avatar, Mechal's dragon-slaying ability, and Wyrm's original body, the Dragon of Origin. Camel's super physique, Mechal's dragon-slaying ability, Wuming's dragon-slaying ability, and the Dragon of Origin's dragon-slaying ability led to this avatar being able to transform Wuming into a dragon-slaying dragon, and it was a huge fantasy breed with super physique and defense. Although Wuming was regarded as a disobedient god in the world of the god slayers, because of Wuming's particularity, he was regarded as half a god slayer after slaying a god. As the Dragon of Origin, he had infinite miracles. Wuming could naturally evolve his avatar. Some people might ask why that avatar looked like a simplified version of the Dragon of Origin that was closest to Wuming's original body. That was not wrong. Because Wuming's original body had been unable to leave the Dragon of Origin, Wuming prepared such an avatar for that reason. It could be said that except for the time and space ability, which was not as strong as the original Dragon of Origin, it was basically comparable to the original Dragon of Origin. The reason why it was the original Dragon of Origin was because of Wuming's current situation. Wuming, who was born from the root and absorbed the power of the root, could become stronger as long as he stayed in the root, and Wuming was still in the Dragon of Origin. There was no doubt that Wuming's original body had become very strong. However, the enemy happened to be Wuming's Dragon of Origin, the Black Mud. That thing and Wuming restrained each other. It could be said that if there were enough of them, it would not be a problem to kill Wuming. Unfortunately, if there were such a huge number of them, then all the worlds would have been destroyed long ago. Because such a huge number could have swallowed all the worlds. It was precisely because there was a strange existence that could restrain Wuming and was restrained by Wuming that Wuming did not dare to go out of the Dragon of Origin casually. If a large number of black mud accidentally invaded the Dragon of Origin, Wuming would not be able to break in no matter what. Just like how the black mud attacked Wuming when he was inside the Dragon of Origin, Wuming was inside the Dragon of Origin and was supported by the power of the Dragon of Origin, so he easily destroyed the black mud. If a large number of black mud invaded the Dragon of Origin, it would be really troublesome. Fortunately, the black mud had been distributed. If Wuming had returned to the Dragon of Origin, it was very likely that Wuming would be dead by now. Well, luck was also a part of one's strength. Returning to the main topic, the huge white dragon was still chasing after the Star Cup's consciousness. Wuming's persistent pursuit made the Star Cup's consciousness feel rather helpless and was on the verge of tears. Chapter 450. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness was being chased by Wuming was because Star Cup's consciousness couldn't break through the white dragon scales on Wuming's body after using Dragon Seed. The white dragon scales on Wuming's body weren't hard. Instead, they were quite tough. When Artha's attack landed on them, it was like punching cotton. It wasn't very effective. It wasn't that Star Cup's consciousness couldn't break through Wuming's defense. If Wuming just stood there and let it hit him, it would be fine, but Wuming's claws were not to be trifled with, not to mention that he also had other magic spells. Don't forget that after using Dragon Seed Incarnation, Wuming's strength was comparable to Wuming's body before entering the big source. The root dragon's body was no joke. Therefore, Star Cup's consciousness had only one way, and that was to distance itself from Wuming. The consciousness of the Star Cup pulled away from Wuming and compressed the Sky Strike and even the God Strike into its palm, presenting a compressed attack. Naturally, Wuming's scales were just decorations. That was also the reason why Wuming chased after Star Cup's consciousness. Because Wuming also knew that was why he kept chasing after it, which led to the current situation. It could be said that if either Wuming or Star Cup's consciousness made a mistake, they would suffer a fatal blow. That was the reason why mistakes between masters could be fatal. Damn it! Can't you stop chasing me? Star Cup's consciousness said angrily. Then, Artesius's body merged into space and disappeared. Wuming, on the other hand, used his perception to find the place where Artesius appeared through the characteristics of space and time. Although the characteristics of space and time were very weak in the Dragon Seed Incarnation state, it was enough for Wuming to catch up with Star Cup's consciousness again. When Star Cup's consciousness controlled Artesius's body to come out of space, Wuming was about to touch it again. Star Cup's consciousness had no choice but to continue running. And why did it not come out directly after merging into space? Maybe it was because of the root black mud, which made it subconsciously not run away. That was also the reason why Wuming said that only one of them could survive. It was like a battle between old enemies. Although it was very frustrating and weak, it couldn't escape. Do you think I'll let you go when I've already revealed my true form? Wuming teased the consciousness of the star cup. If Wuming didn't use the dragon seed, or if Wuming didn't use dragon seed, star cup's consciousness would probably leave this world directly. Wuming's consciousness only had power on this planet's body. Wuming might not come back, thinking that it was better to avoid trouble. Although Wuming promised Artesius to take care of his skywing species, Wuming reckoned that they would very likely return to Artesius after seeing Star Cup's consciousness using Artesius's body. After all, although Artesius had entrusted the skywing species to Wuming, no creature would follow a new master wholeheartedly. In that case, Wuming would have to wait until he dealt with the mastermind behind the burning of humanity before he came back to solve this small problem. But then again, this Star Cup's consciousness is really just a consciousness. Wuming began to mock Star Cup's consciousness. The expression of Star Cup's consciousness, who was using Artesius's body, also changed. This meant that Wuming was right. Although Wuming had fought with this Star Cup's consciousness more than a dozen times, the other party did not have any special abilities and had been using Artesius's ability the entire time. Logically speaking, the Star Cup represented the sovereignty of this planet. Holding the Star Cup meant that it was the master of this planet, which was the so-called only god. In that case, shouldn't the consciousness born from the Star Cup be in existence like Gaia? This was also why Wuming had used the dragon seed when he fought with the other party. It was because only with this clone did Wuming have the confidence to fight against such a super powerhouse. In the end, Wuming discovered that the other party was not really an existence similar to the suppression power Gaia. It was just a consciousness. It could only use the Star Cup's power to sneak attack Artesius. In other aspects, it still needed to rely on someone else's body to move. Did this not prove that the other party was actually bluffing? If it's really as I think, all you can do now is use Artesius's ability. Wuming narrowed his eyes at the other party. In that case, Wuming also began to suspect that this consciousness did not belong to the Star Cup. I have to admit, Wuming, your intelligence is not lower than mine. The Star Cup's consciousness that was using Artesius's body continued to fly. While dodging Wuming's attacks, it said in a dull tone. It should be because you can't use the power of this world that you exposed yourself. Wuming was still following behind the Star Cup's consciousness. He would not stop attacking just because he had a conversation with the other party. You're right. I'm indeed just a consciousness. Without a body, I can't move as I wish. That's why I wanted to instigate Artesius, the most powerful war god. Then, the Star Cup's consciousness became happy. However, I didn't expect him to be such a blockhead. He knew that he would die, but he didn't accept the power. That's just as well. I've helped him by taking out his spirit essence. The Star Cup's consciousness showed a proud expression. This made Wuming even more displeased. I'm sure Artesius's soul in the elf corridor is angry that you're using his body. As he spoke, Wuming had already started to gather flames in his mouth. Like a heat ray, a fire dragon rushed toward the Star Cup's consciousness. The Star Cup's consciousness was still controlling Artesius's body to dodge. However, because it was a fire ray that was connected to Wuming's mouth, the Star Cup's consciousness had a hard time dodging. Then, it was grazed by Wuming's white flame. Kaboom! The space fluctuated violently. The other party escaped into space. The remaining flames swept across the ground, or rather, the ground that had turned into a sea made a series of explosions. Due to the excessive power, Wuming had already distanced himself from the Star Cup's consciousness after he stopped shooting the flames. Ha ha ha! You've finally fallen for it, Wuming. The Star Cup's consciousness said proudly. I didn't show it earlier. Insulting Artesius while using his body was enough to make Wuming slightly angry. It used this to provoke Wuming so that Wuming could not stop the flames in time. In other words, Wuming had used a skill that required a long time to cast. At the same time, the Star Cup's consciousness controlled Artesius to gather a thin light needle with unknown energy in its hand. It was a divine strike that was even more condensed and mixed with the power of origin. You can condense the divine strike to such a degree? Wuming was shocked. Although he had expected Wuming to use the divine strike that was mixed with the power of origin to attack Wuming, Wuming did not expect it to be able to condense the divine strike to such a degree. If it was the divine strike, Wuming's scales would not be able to block it. This is my advantage as the Star Cup's consciousness and the origin black soil, the Star Cup's consciousness said proudly. Goodbye, Dragon of Origin. The Star Cup's consciousness shouted and threw the divine strike at Wuming. The divine strike needle thrown by Artesius' body was quite fast. Wuming, who could not use Phoenix for the time being, could not dodge it. The divine strike needle was aimed at Wuming's brain. It had to be said that the Star Cup's consciousness was quite high. If it pierced through his heart, Wuming would definitely not die. However, if it pierced through his brain, even if he did not die, he would fall into a coma. In this way, Wuming would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, it did not matter what the Star Cup's attack was because Wuming was prepared to defend against any kind of attack. No, he could steal it. With a flash of golden light, Wuming flew into the sky unscathed. The Star Cup's consciousness looked at Wuming in disbelief. How is this possible? Chapter 451. The heaven and earth anomaly that was triggered by the divine striker needle just now gradually disappeared along with the disappearance of the divine striker needle. The sky became gloomy again. Because the sky was gloomy to begin with, and because it was night time, the sky seemed even gloomier at this moment. Logically speaking, the divine striker needle released by the Star Cup's consciousness should have hit Wuming. However, the divine striker needle disappeared after a flash of golden light, and Wuming was completely fine. Checkmate. Wuming took advantage of the Star Cup's consciousness shock and flapped his huge wings as he charged toward it. The Star Cup's consciousness quickly recovered from the shock and quickly retreated. He was prepared to use his spatial ability to escape into space and get away from Wuming again. He must still have some trump card. The disappearance of the divine striker needle must be related to the opponent's trump card. I don't believe that trump card can be used continuously. If there's another chance, he'll be done for. The Star Cup's consciousness thought as he looked at the huge dragon shadow that was approaching him and smiled proudly. As long as it was not the end, the victor was not certain. Then, he was caught by Wuming's dragon claws. Bam! Wuming's body, which was controlled by the Star Cup's consciousness, made a sound that resembled the sound of metal colliding. Clank, then, the sound of chains could be heard. Golden ripples appeared out of thin air, and a golden chain that seemed to have infinite length extended from it and firmly bound the Star Cup's consciousness in Wuming's hand. This way, with the heaven lock that was baptized by the origin black mud in the body controlled by the Star Cup's consciousness could not come out. How is this possible? How can I not use my spatial ability? The Star Cup's consciousness said in a panic. After a moment of panic, the Star Cup's consciousness also discovered the problem. Now that he casually looked around, the space around him was filled with tactics that he had never seen before. These tactics covered the surrounding space and extended into the distance. These tactics seemed to have locked the space and were firmly attached to it. Although they were separated by a few meters, an invisible force linked them together. As a result, the surrounding space, or rather, the space in the southwest of the Yar-Ala continent, was locked by these tactics. In short, the space that originally allowed free passage was blocked, or rather, blocked. Why do you think I've been chasing you in this place in the southwest of the Yar-Ala continent instead of going to other places? Wuming said to the Star Cup's consciousness that was struggling in his claws. Although the chase between the two only took place in the southwest part of the destroyed Yar-Ala continent, it was still not over yet. Firstly, Wuming had purposely trapped Star Cup's consciousness in this place. Secondly, this planet was its palace to Star Cup's consciousness. If it could deal with the enemy in one room, it would naturally not affect the entire palace. After all, no one would choose a plan with less benefits, and the consciousness of the star cup was the same. I've been waiting for this moment to come, Wyrm said in a final tone. The heavy rain of Star Cup's consciousness fell into the fishing net that Wyrm had set up for a long time. Wyrm had set up a space lock tactic in the space, and Star Cup's consciousness did not leave this area. In the end, the space lock tactic in the southwest part of the Yar-Ala continent formed a link and formed a magic circle. The magic circle tightly locked the space in the area where Wyrm and Star Cup's consciousness were. In mathematical terms, it was 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, plus 1 + 1 equals infinity. If it was only a single tactic or multiple tactics, Star Cup's consciousness could use Arthas's physical ability to use the spatial ability to escape. However, the space lock in the southwest part of the Yar-Ala continent had already been formed. In addition to the binding of the heaven lock, Star Cup's consciousness could forget about escaping. Impossible. As Star Cup's consciousness, how could I not discover these tactics that you've set up? Although Star Cup's consciousness did not have much combat power, Star Cup's consciousness could be said to be unprecedentedly powerful in terms of perception, investigation, and so on. No matter what, it was still the consciousness of the planet's sovereign key. Naturally, its spiritual power should be able to detect these tactics. Due to anger, Star Cup's consciousness used its spiritual power to scan the tactics. In the end, it discovered something unusual. The tactics were originally hidden. This was something that both Wyrm and Star Cup's consciousness knew. Now, these tactics were revealed because they had been activated. Other than that, when Star Cup's consciousness scanned these tactics, it discovered that there were other tactics mixed in with these space lock tactics. It was because of these other tactics that Star Cup's consciousness did not notice the existence of these space lock tactics. Those are tactics that can block perception. Star Cup's consciousness was completely shocked. That's right. There were some shielding tactics mixed in with the space lock tactics. These shielding tactics were like the space lock tactics. They were linked together and formed a magic circle. It was these shielding tactics magic circles combined with the space lock tactics magic circle that caused Star Cup's consciousness to be captured by Wyrm. Even if it's you, it's impossible for you to have a tactic that can block my perception. As the planet's sovereign key's consciousness, it was impossible for its spiritual power not to notice anything. Also, why did my divine firing needle disappear? How many trump cards are you hiding? Star Cup's consciousness seemed to have gone crazy at the moment. It gave off a feeling that it was at the end of its road and would definitely die. However, Wyrm did not say anything else. You don't need to know about this. Return obediently and apologize to Arthas. As Wyrm spoke, a trace of lightning and wind appeared on the dragon claw that was holding the Star Cup's consciousness, as well as an invisible source of power. After all, Star Cup's consciousness that had the origin black soil had to be dealt with using origin power. Sizzle sizzle. Lightning crackled. Countless divine lightning surged out of Wyrm's body. Whoosh, whoosh. The raging storm was mixed in with the thunder and lightning. Two different forces converged on Wyrm's dragon claw that was holding Star Cup's consciousness. No. You can't do this. I am Star Cup's consciousness. I can help you gain control of this planet. Star Cup's consciousness seemed to be aware of its death and frantically begged for mercy. On the contrary, Wyrm felt a bit strange. Arthas was a wise man. Other than that, Wyrm didn't think that destroying Arthas' body would kill it. Boom. Wyrm didn't waste any more time and directly crushed the clone's body with the power of Thunder God's avatar and Storm's avatar. The voice of Star Cup's consciousness stopped abruptly. Wyrm looked at Star Cup that was revealed and looked at it vigilantly. He constantly scanned it with his spiritual power, but he didn't find the existence of Star Cup's consciousness. Is it really dead? Wyrm wondered. Of course, it wasn't that simple. In the distance, the current capital of the Forest Elves, Temple of Canas. In the Temple of Canas, where the Forest Elves worshipped, with a stream of light, a green figure with burning flames appeared. Chapter 452. Damn it! Dragon of Origin. The green figure said viciously as he sat weakly in his own temple. This figure was the forest god Canis, who had taken Rick's right arm. However, his tone was rather strange. If Wyrm was here, he would definitely recognize this tone. This was Canis, who had just been destroyed by Wyrm and replicated by Arthas' body. Arthas had rejected the Star Cup. In order to ensure that he could come out of the Earth's core, the Star Cup's consciousness chose another god, which was Canis. The Star Cup's consciousness used the Star Cup's power to erase Canis' personality and then took control of Canis' body. However, unlike replicating Arthas' body, the Star Cup's consciousness simply controlled it and did not integrate itself into it. This was also why Canis, who had taken Rick's body by surprise, was expressionless. After that, when Wyrm was fighting with the Star Cup's consciousness, in order to not let Canis escape, Wyrm used his familiar authority that he had not used for a long time. When he killed Neza in the God Slayer world, Neza wanted to continue fooling around and did not want to return to the myths, so he turned into Wyrm's authority, which was a familiar with self-awareness. Then, Wyrm released Neza to stop Canis. Canis, who had temporarily lost the control of the Star Cup's consciousness, was judged to automatically attack the enemy, so he fought with Neza. Simply put, it's hanging up the phone, for all. Then, because the battle between Wyrm and the Star Cup's consciousness was too intense, Canis and Neza were blown away and continued to fight in the center of the Yar-Ala continent. The burn marks on her body were left by Neza, so using the fire-tipped spear to deal with the forest god was the most appropriate choice. Then, when Wyrm crushed Arthas' body that the Star Cup's consciousness had replicated, the Star Cup's consciousness that controlled Canis' body escaped. However, the real result was that the Star Cup's consciousness came to Canis' body and completely took control of her body. It could be said that the Star Cup's consciousness begging for mercy was purely an act for Wyrm to see. Its purpose was to make Wyrm think that the Star Cup's consciousness was really dead. After all, even Wyrm had praised the Star Cup's consciousness as a wise one. In terms of hypostasis, the Star Cup's consciousness should be half a level of suppression, so of course it would not be so weak. Although it had been a noob for a long time. Although Forest God's body's body, it's not weak, I'll just make do with it. After all, the Forest God was a master of 186 spells. He could cast 186 types of spells at the same time. He was one of the best among the gods. Because Canis the Star Cup's consciousness, Canis's consciousnesses as well. He can't control the Star Cup anyway, so I don't need to be in a hurry. Once I recover, I'll touch the Star Cup and use Canis' body to become the only god. Because the Star Cup's consciousness previously controlled Arthas' body was a defective copy of the Star Cup's consciousness, it could not be recognized as a god by the Star Cup's consciousness. Therefore, the Star Cup's consciousness was not the only god. The reason it did not directly use Canis' body to become the only god was because Canis' body was too weak. Moreover, the Star Cup's consciousness thought that it could defeat Wyrm. In the end, it failed. Although I'm now free from the Star Cup, Arthas is dead. As long as this body is fine, the final victor will still be me. After all, Wyrm was not qualified to become the only god on this planet. Other than Arthas and Wyrm, the Star Cup's consciousness did not care about the other gods. They're just a bunch of fools who don't know how to use their wisdom. They're nothing to worry about. The Star Cup's consciousness laughed when it thought of the other gods. Even those who were called gods were a bunch of simple-minded people who only knew how to flaunt their innate abilities. Now that the Star Cup has fallen into his hands, for safety's sake, I'd better stay in this body obediently and wait for him to leave, the Star Cup's consciousness said. After all, we can't use the Star Cup. For the sake of humans, he would not take the Star Cup away. He would definitely leave the Star Cup for the humans. However, Wyrm did not know that humans could not use the Star Cup either. I really want to see his expression when he finds out that humans can't use the Star Cup. It'll be very interesting, the Star Cup's consciousness said with a smile. Then, the star cup's consciousness controlled Kana's body and destroyed the statue of Kana's that was used for worship with magic. It sat on the platform of the statue and began to repair the body. Kana's body was like a vacuum cleaner that was turned on to its maximum capacity. It could be seen with the naked eye that Kana's body was madly absorbing the spirits in the air. Not only was its spirit injured by Wuming, but its body was also injured by Neza. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness needed to recuperate. Now, Kana's body was an existence that would burp if it was hit by the void's Zeroth ward or marrow explosion. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness needed to heal the injuries of this body. As a natural god, Kana's and other god species naturally had an advantage. As long as they absorbed the spirits in the air, they would be able to slowly recover from their injuries. After all, there was still someone in the outside world that was not to be trifled with. This place was the capital of the forest elves. The chances of someone breaking in were almost zero. Therefore, the star cup's consciousness could safely absorb the spirits to heal its injuries. Then, the star cup's consciousness that was absorbing the spirits suddenly realized that there was something wrong with these spirits. It was just like when you drank ordinary milk and realized that the milk tasted strange. Then, before the star cup's consciousness could react, Kana's body suddenly exploded. Bang! The explosion of Kana's body caused the entire temple of Kana's to collapse. The forest goblins and forest goblins who were guarding the outside were all in a panic. The temple of the god they worshipped was blown up, and that was a big deal. The temple had always been the place where the forest elves communicated with Kana's, but now it had exploded. This was no less than the collapse of the family's ancestral hall. It was a heavy blow to the people. As the forest elves panicked and tried to rescue them, Shinka Nilbar hid in a house not far from the temple and looked at the collapsed temple with cold eyes. Sucking in a fairy that was activated by my Zeroth ward of the void, plus you're heavily injured. What a pity. Lord God, you're finally going to die by my hands. Hee hee. Hee hee hee. Xinku's expression darkened as she spoke, which made the girl behind her a little scared. This way, we can be together, Nina, say. Senior. The girl, called Nina, looked at her senior nervously. Her body kept trembling. Perhaps, she would be very lucky in the future. At the same time, Wuming, who was still checking the star cup, suddenly noticed that something was wrong with the star cup. You finally came out, star cup's consciousness. Chapter 453. Wuming looked at the tiny Xingchui on his huge dragon claw and breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know why he couldn't find it before, Wuming finally found Xingchui's consciousness. I thought you really disappeared, but it turns out you were still hiding. After all, Wuming didn't believe that the death of a mere body could kill Xingchui's consciousness. Sure enough, after Wuming's perseverance, Xingchui's consciousness finally came out. Damn! Forest elves. Xingchui's consciousness said weakly. Previously, because Wuming destroyed its body, Xingchui's consciousness was weakened. This time, it was plotted against in the temple of Kana's, and now Xingchui's consciousness could no longer stay awake. The star cup's consciousness that absorbed the spirit to heal its injuries was like an 4-drip, but someone injected poison into the 4-drip, and all the absorbed spirit was detonated by the Zeroth ward of void. Kana's was completely dead, and the star cup's consciousness returned to the star cup because it had nowhere to go. However, it really didn't expect that the forest elves would attack their creator, forest god Kana's. Although Xingchui's consciousness didn't pay much attention to Kana's was also an evil god, so why would someone want to kill her? All kinds of questions troubled Xingchui's consciousness, but now, Xingchui's consciousness didn't have time to think about other things. If it didn't solve the crisis in front of it, it would really die. Xingchui's consciousness didn't think that Wuming, who could mix a shielding technique into a space lock technique, wouldn't use a technique that targeted its spiritual body, which was its consciousness. Wait. I have something to say. Xingchui's consciousness, who knew that it was already at the end of the road, quickly said. do you still want to say something? But I won't give you the chance. Wuming finally understood that the victor was the righteous one, while the villains died because they talked too much, laughing emoji. Goodbye. Immediately afterward, Wuming took advantage of the fact that his sorcerer avatar was still active and chanted the spell again. Noble and powerful, wise and kind. Thus, I shall become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. In an instant, Wuming's inner stone plate, which represented the sorcerer's incarnation, turned red. A large amount of mana surged into the star cup. Then, in the silence of the star cup's consciousness, which had become even more muddled due to its weakened state, Wuming completely eliminated it. Although it was a bit anticlimactic, it's finally over. Wuming complained as he looked to the east. Just like what Wuming knew, the sun appeared from the east. At this time, Wuming just happened to catch the sunrise. Watching the sunrise, Wuming logged out of the dragon seed avatar. Wuming's gigantic dragon body slowly turned into the size of a human. He once again regained his black-haired, red-eyed, and cloaked appearance. Then, Wuming clutched his head in pain. Ugh! The burden is a little too much. The reason why he said that was because more than half of Wuming's 12 avatars were now in a state of overload. Overload's red alert state was not the end of it. It also caused damage to Wuming's spirit and body. After all, that avatar was not the real body, but a substitute made by Wuming. Previously, because of the battle with Artemis, Wuming caused his 2 avatars, the Titan and the Sun, to fall into a red alert state and temporarily could not be used. In order to eliminate the aftermath of the battle between the two, Wuming used the combination of Annihilation and Flood, and at the same time, those 2 avatars also fell into a red alert state. After all, if it was only Annihilation, it would not be able to reach the range, and if it was only Flood, it would not be able to eliminate the aftermath, so he had to combine the 2. Because Wuming's avatar could only use 1 avatar at a time, using 2 avatars together directly entered a red alert state. After that, in order to save Rick, Wuming's Phoenix was also unable to be used. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have to chase after Star Cup's consciousness, he could just use Phoenix to catch it. Fortunately, Wuming's avatar was not counted in the number of avatars he could use. Otherwise, Wuming would not be able to use other avatars the moment his avatar was on the ground. After that, Wuming used Dragon Seed to restore his body to a state where he could use multiple avatars for a short time. With that, Wuming secretly used Sorcerer's avatar to set up a space blockade and a space shielding technique. The reason why Star Cup's consciousness did not notice it was because Sorcerer's avatar's casting effect was enhanced. After that, because he needed to destroy Artemis's avatar that Star Cup's consciousness copied, Storm and Thunder God also fell into a red alert state for the time being. In addition to Warrior's avatar, Wuming had a total of 8 avatars in overload. Previously, Star Cup's consciousness provoked Wuming with words, which made Wuming angry, and then attacked Wuming with Firing Needle. At that time, Wuming used Warrior's avatar to seal Firing Needle. After all, Wuming was also a man who fought Artemis before, so he was very familiar with Firing Needle. Although Wuming's warrior avatar evolved from Welislana's warrior avatar, unlike Welislana's warrior avatar, he didn't need to chant to use it on the enemy, he only needed to know the knowledge to use it. However, because it was instantaneous, and because of the power of Firing Needle, Warrior's avatar also fell into overload. And Sorcerer's avatar also fell into overload because of Star Cup's consciousness just now. Now, Wuming only had 3 avatars left, Dragon Seed, Dependent, and Vitality. 9 avatars fell into overload. Because of that, Wuming felt very uncomfortable, both physically and mentally. After all, Wuming's mental power was quite strong, and he meditated every day. At that moment, he just felt a little tired. On the contrary, his physical body had some problems. Because this body was made, not only could it not allow Wuming to exert his full strength, but its physical strength was also far inferior to his original body. 9 of the 12 avatars fell into overload, and Wuming felt extremely painful. Looking at Star Cup in his hand, Wuming threw it casually, and golden ripples swallowed Star Cup. Then Wuming opened the portal, found a plane, and sat cross-legged. I'd better heal my injuries first. The reason why he didn't sit on the ground was because the battlefield just now had turned into an ocean, the one with the supreme divine power, the god protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him, like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. As soon as Sorcerer's avatar finished speaking, the elves between heaven and earth began to surge, but Wuming did not absorb those elves. First of all, what Wuming needed was magical power, not elves. Second, those elves were alive. If possible, Wuming would not hurt them. In that way, Wuming closed his eyes and began to recover. And those elves wrapped around Wuming's body as if they were protecting him. A little bit of starlight danced with the divine person. Chapter 454. Vitality Avatar's characteristic: if there is energy that can be absorbed, it will speed up the recovery speed. Even if there is no magical power in this world, there is only elves, but fortunately, Wuming's Vitality Avatar can heal Wuming's injuries without energy, so it's not a big deal at all. After almost an hour, Wuming's injuries were almost healed. Feeling his heart, Wuming found that the red color of the stone plate that entered the state of overload was fading little by little at this moment. It seems that Vitality Avatar can also relieve the overload of other avatars. Although this was the case, Wuming also stopped activating Vitality Avatar. At present, his physical and mental aspects are almost recovered, and there is no need to restore those avatars at this time. After all, Star Cup is still in my hands, I can't use it, and humans can't use it either. I have to think of a way. Star Cup's consciousness said before that Wuming can't become the only god of this planet, and he can't control Star Cup, and humans are the same. Although Wuming didn't think what Star Cup's consciousness told him was a lie, but to be on the safe side, Wuming still checked Star Cup after getting it. Wuming indeed can't control Star Cup, maybe because Wuming himself is not a native of this world. And as for whether humans can control Holy Cup, Wuming doesn't know. After all, Star Cup's consciousness said so. If humans are not recognized by Star Cup, it is likely that humans can't become the ruler of this planet, just like what Star Cup's consciousness said. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. With that said, Wuming withdrew from his inner world and opened his eyes. When Wuming observed his inner stone plate, he sensed that some people came from the outside world, but because the other party was not malicious, Wuming didn't care. However, it was not good to just leave those people alone, so he was ready to come out to meet them at this time. Then he was shocked by the scene in front of him. Wuming opened his eyes and saw many little angels in front of him. Ahem. They were the infant version of Sky Wings, and a huge fantasy breed that looked like a floating island, Abendheim. Anyone who saw this scene would be given a fright. Nearly 10,000 Sky Wings were collectively kneeling on this vast plain. It was a spectacular sight. It was a good thing that Silent Cry had randomly chosen a plain. Otherwise, the Sky Wings would not have been able to collectively kneel here. Moreover, with Abendheim around, this plain seemed a little small. Why are you here? Wuming subconsciously asked when he saw the Sky Wings half kneeling on the ground with their heads lowered. Although Wuming sensed that someone was coming, he didn't expect there to be so many of them. When Wuming didn't release his psychic power, he only maintained a vague sense of perception. Therefore, when Wuming opened his eyes, he was shocked. Soon after, Azrael, who was at the front of the Sky Wings, answered Wuming. Lord Arthas has entrusted us to you. From now on, Lord Wuming will be our new master, Azrael said expressionlessly but respectfully. As the first Skywing breed created by Arthas, Azrael was the equivalent of the big sister of the Skywings. Thus, with Arthas dead, Azrael was the leader. That's true. Arthas has entrusted you all to me, Wuming said and began to ponder. Wuming did not know if the Skywing breed's personalities were like Arthas, where the strong were respected, but since Arthas was worried about his creations, Wuming believed that although these Skywings had been entrusted to Wuming by Arthas, they might not be calm on the inside. Having become the subordinates of the enemy who had killed their master, and having been entrusted to do so by their master, Wyrm did not believe that the Skywings could be as heartless as the Triumph breeds. Ahem. Although it wasn't very nice to say that about the Triumph breeds, aside from Shobi, the rest of the Triumph breeds were truly heartless, Wyrm released his mental energy and probed the tens of thousands of Skywings in front of him, discovering some clues. Every Skywing breed had a sad expression on their faces, and Wyrm could tell that they wanted to commit suicide. The reason why they had been able to follow Azrael to Wyrm was very likely because they had to obey their master's final order. This was no good. Putting aside whether or not Wyrm would order them to do some missions, in this state, they might not be able to survive in battle. 90% of those whose hearts were already dead would die in that battle. The remaining 10% were those who were strong enough to survive even if they fought absent-mindedly. Instantly, Wyrm came up with a good idea. "Raise your heads, Skywings," Wyrm used his magic and softly said, but his voice still reached the ears of every Skywing breed. The Skywings raised their heads and expressionlessly looked at Wyrm. "Arthas is a worthy opponent, but the two of us have our reasons for fighting." Arthas was doing it for his lifelong wish, while Wyrm was doing it for Arthas not to snatch the Star Cup. In the end, Arthas's death could be considered an accident. Wyrm had not expected Arthas's spirit essence to be sealed into the throne by the Star Cup's consciousness. If Wyrm had really wanted to kill Arthas, he would not have used the power of the flood and annihilation to eliminate the aftermath of their battle. "I won't pretend to be polite with you. Arthas's death is truly an accident." When Wyrm said this, not only did the Skywings who had thoughts of committing suicide become angry, even the Skywings who wanted to obey Arthas's final order frowned, especially Azrael. "But I won't shirk my responsibility. I'll take on this responsibility and the task my friend Arthas entrusted to me." After all, the two of them had hit it off immediately after the battle. Regardless of whether Arthas died or not, the friendship between the two of them was inseparable. "Have hope for the future. Don't give up on your lives, because I'll always be waiting for you. I'll wait for you to challenge me until you kill me." Wyrm's words caused an uproar among the Skywings. Even Abendheim was shaken. It was clear that he was not calm. "You guys also want to avenge Arthas, right? As one of his murderers, you'll definitely choose to avenge him if you can." Wyrm was like a demon, tempting the Skywings. "I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you guys have practically unlimited lifespans? Then, let your own blade be your lifelong goal." Almost every Skywing excitedly flapped their wings. Some really wanted to kill Wyrm, while others were excited to be able to challenge an expert like Wyrm. Azrael's eyes widened as she stared at her current master in shock. As the big sister, how could she not see that Wyrm was giving the Skywings hope and a goal to live on? Apart from Azrael, quite a few of the more senior Skywings also saw Wyrm's intentions. Perhaps letting him become the new master of the Skywings wasn't a bad idea. Afterward, the Skywings spoke in unison. "As you command, my lord." Chapter 455. After that, Wyrm brought the Skywing breeds back to Abendheim and began to use Abendheim's restoration technique to heal the Skywing breeds. After using all their strength, the Skywing breeds would turn into a 10-year-old child and enter a weakened state. Wyrm even suspected that Arthas was a Lullicon. In this weakened state, the Skywing breed's combat strength would be greatly reduced. It could be said that even the weakest human in this world could kill a Skywing breed. In response to this, the Skywing species used a technique to develop a set of equipment specifically designed to speed up their recovery. After the Skywing breeds used up all their strength and turned into children, they would need about 50 years to recover to their original state. Of course, this number was under the condition that there was no external force, and the Skywing breeds relied on their own strength to recover. With the Skywing breed's belligerent nature, they would not be able to fight freely for 50 years. However, this was how the restoration technique was created. Through a special technique, the Skywing breeds developed a device that could speed up the recovery of the Skywing breeds after using up all their strength. In just a few days, the Skywing breeds could completely recover what would take 50 years to recover. Not only that, but if they were heavily injured, they could also go to the restoration technique to recover. Simply put, it was like the spring in the game. However, because there were not many devices, they could only be used in batches. It would probably take several months for the nearly 10,000 Skywing breeds to recover. Wuming looked at the device in front of him. One by one, the Skywing breeds floated in the device, and the spirit around them accelerated into their bodies. Wuming had some ideas. The Skywing breeds shrank because they ran out of energy, and this device is used to speed up their absorption of spirit. So that's how it works, Wuming said after seeing through the mechanism of the device. Your judgment is correct, Sir Wuming. This is the mechanism of our Skywing breed's restoration technique, Meow, Azriel, who had been following Wuming, said with a strange tone. Wuming looked at Azriel with a strange expression. Why didn't Azriel use the word meow before, but now? Could it be that she had forgotten because she was too sad? Wuming thought as he looked at Azriel. Master Wuming, what's wrong meow? Azriel stared at Wuming with her big cute eyes and asked curiously. No, nothing. Wuming shook his head. Wuming felt that if he continued to ask, it might be very bad, so he didn't ask. It was just a habit. By the way, Azriel, come with me. Wuming turned and walked towards a corner behind him. Meow. Is Lord Wuming going to attack me? For my sisters, I'm willing to go through fire and water today, meow. Azriel instantly acted as if she was about to be defiled, and then acted as if she was willing to go through fire and water to die a heroic death. What are you thinking about? It's just an experiment. Wuming turned his head and looked helplessly at Azriel, who was possessed by a drama queen, and complained. Experiment, meow. Azriel was puzzled. Although she had been acting just now, Azriel's puzzled expression was real. She was puzzled by Wuming's experiment. However, although she did not understand or know what the experiment was, Azriel still obediently followed Wuming to a corner. Are you ready, Azriel? Wuming pretended to be serious as he looked at Azriel. I'm ready, meow. Azriel said nervously. It could not be helped. Who asked Wuming to be so serious? Then, Wuming began to chant. The one who has the supreme divine power, the god protects him, the devil hates him, no enemy can get close to him, like a fountain of vitality that is constantly surging, grant the world equal protection. After Wuming finished chanting, his body began to glow. Then, Wuming put his palm on Azriel's head. With Azriel's current height, Wuming could just touch Azriel's small head when he raised his hand. In an instant, the light on Wuming's body passed through Wuming's arm on Azriel's head. Immediately afterward, countless elves gathered, creating a strong whirlwind. Azriel and Wuming were like the eye of the storm, attracting countless elves with them as the center. Azriel was growing a little bit bigger, but the speed was very slow. After seeing the effect, Wuming increased the output of Vitality Incarnation. Then, in just a few breaths, Azriel grew back to her original state. In short, Azriel recovered from the state of a 10-year-old child to the state of a 16-year-old girl. Sure enough, Vitality Incarnation was also useful for the Skywing race. Wuming said in his heart. Immediately afterward, Wuming put down his hand on Azriel's head, and then said to Azriel. Check if you have recovered, Azriel. Azriel reacted instantly and began to feel her physical condition. Azriel was stunned from the beginning. If it weren't for Wuming's words, it would have taken her a while to recover. Meow. I've actually fully recovered, meow. Azriel shouted excitedly after feeling the state of her body. My lord, thank you very much, meow. Azriel knelt on one knee to Wuming. Wuming smiled. After all, as the eldest sister, you can't do anything without recovering your strength. The reason why Azriel followed Wuming was that she didn't want to enter the recovery device herself. She wanted to give the few places to enter the recovery device for recovery to the other sisters. Power is used to protect. Only by mastering power can you protect the people you want to protect. Wuming's words reminded Azriel of Arthas. Her Skywing race failed to protect Arthas. Then, Azriel looked at Wuming. Although Sir Arthas's death is related to Sir Wuming, Sir Arthas did not blame you. Instead, he entrusted us to Sir Wuming. Therefore, I persuaded the sisters who opposed and led the Skywing race to find Sir Wuming. Azriel got rid of her habit of speaking. When Azriel said this, Wuming understood. It turned out that Azriel had done some brainwashing on the Skywing race. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could they so easily submit to their master's enemy, even if it was the original master's order? However, I don't know if it's because Sir Arthas's status is too high, or if it's because I've been bound by the idea of the strong being respected, but I don't feel too much about Sir Arthas's death, nor am I too hostile towards Sir Wuming. What I'm thinking about is the future of my sisters. That was why Azriel had brought the Skywing race to Wuming so quickly. Wuming did not say anything, nor did he interrupt Azriel. He just listened quietly. I've thought about it before. Someone who was entrusted by Sir Arthas can't be too bad. Now that I think about it, it's not unreasonable for Sir Wuming to be able to defeat Sir Arthas. Azriel then smiled sweetly at Wuming. Protecting the thoughts of others. Is that why Sir Wuming is so powerful? I'll remember that. In the future, I'll also protect you. In order to make up for the regret of not being able to protect Sir Arthas, in order to protect Sir Arthas's final order, in order to protect my sisters, and even more so, to protect my dearest master. After Azriel finished speaking, one of the 12 stone plates in Wuming's heart automatically lit up. In an instant, Azriel's eye of the sword, which represented death, began to change. The sword became wider, and it became similar to a shield, which represented protection. Protect me. Wuming really did not think that there would be a day when he would need protection. If that day came, the enemy would not be someone that Azriel could deal with. However, it was her intention. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm waiting for that day. Chapter 456. After coming out of the corner with Azriel, the other Skywings looked curiously at Soundless and Azriel, who had recovered her body. After all, Azriel was still in her infant state. In just a few minutes, Azriel had returned to her original state. Not only that, but Azriel's aura had also become different from before. This could not help but make people, no, it made the Skywings curious. In addition, the gathering of elves and the whirlwind in the corner had also attracted the attention of the Skywings. They were eager to know what had happened. Wuming helplessly looked at the dozens of pairs of wolf-like eyes. I think the Skywings are not thirsting for knowledge, but for the unknown. When they all recover, I must give the order for all of them to learn and collect knowledge. Aren't you all interested in the unknown? Do you know the saying, there's no end to learning? Go and learn. Ahem. Lord Wuming has something important to say. Hurry up and call the others over. Tell everyone that the Skywings in the recovery device should also go and help, meow, because the recovery device was limited, except for the Skywings who had entered the recovery device and the dozens of Skywings who had stayed behind. The other Skywings returned to their rooms. By the way, the Skywings' rooms did not have doors or windows, and they could only be entered through the Skywings' innate spatial ability. Although they had entered the weak state of a 10-year-old child, the Skywings could still use their spatial ability to enter and exit their homes, although it was very strenuous. Afterward, the Skywings who had stayed behind and the ones in the recovery device left to call for others. The reason for this situation was because of Azriel's suggestion. First, let's talk about the change in Azriel's eyes. Originally, the Skywings' eyes had a sword-like pupil. Now, Azriel's pupil had turned into a shield. This was not entirely accurate. It should be a pupil that was both sword-like and shield-like. To put it simply, it should be similar to a broad-bladed sword. It was the kind of door that could be used as both a sword and a shield. A broad-bladed sword. The reason for that was because of Wu Ming's avatar, dependence. When Azrael really wanted to submit to Wu Ming, she happened to have Wu Ming's magical power in her body, which triggered the ability of dependent. Now, Azrael had truly become Wu Ming's subordinate. Moreover, she had signed a contract and formed a connection with him. Wu Ming could summon Azrael to help him at any time. In a sense, it was the same as Athena, Guinevere, and Lancelot in the Godslayer world. However, it was more troublesome to summon Athena and the other subordinate deities, while the connection between Azrael and Wu Ming was brought by the dependent, so Wu Ming only needed to use the dependent avatar to summon Azrael, which was much more convenient than summoning Athena and the others. Azrael also noticed that she had a connection with Wu Ming, but because she wanted to be loyal to Wu Ming, Azrael did not mind at all. Then, Azrael proposed that all the Sky Wings should sign a contract with Wu Ming. Wu Ming was a little reluctant. After all, not all the other Sky Wings would be willing. The only belief of the Sky Wings was Arthas, and Wu Ming did not explain much about Arthas' spirit marrow, so in the Sky Wings' hearts, Wu Ming was the murderer of Arthas. The Sky Wings would follow Wu Ming nominally, but if they really signed a master-slave contract, Wu Ming judged that not too many Sky Wings would accept it. Anyway, that was what Wu Ming thought, but he could not resist Azrael's half-instigation and half-coercion. Azrael told Wu Ming that even if he could not form a contract with all of them, he could at least form a contract with some of them. Lord Wu Ming, you're not that bad in the eyes of the Sky Wings, meow. Besides, you're underestimating the Sky Wings too much, meow. These were Azrael's exact words. Afterward, Wu Ming and Azrael came together. Of course, it was also necessary to help the Sky Wing breeds recover. After all, Silent Wonder had agreed to Arthur's request. Now that the Sky Wing breeds were his kin, he had to treat them better. The Sky Wings were created god-slaying weapons, so they had strict rules when it came to discipline. Even though there were nearly 10,000 of them, the Sky Wings quickly gathered. Not long after, all the Sky Wings were in front of Wu Ming. Because there was not much space on Abantiheim's body, the ground, the air, and the trees were filled with Sky Wings. They were all waiting for Wu Ming to speak. Wu Ming glanced at Azrael, and she bowed to Wu Ming before retreating behind him. I've gathered everyone here mainly to recover your bodies. Azrael is an example. My authority can have a recovery effect on your bodies, so I wish to recover all of you in one go. The moment Wu Ming said this, almost all the Sky Wings were stunned. Even their original master, Arthas, could not recover all of them in one go. Also, Azrael has already established a contract with me, so I can summon her at any time. This is also my authority, but Azrael is completely willing. With that said, everyone turned to look at Azrael. Azrael nodded, indicating that she was willing to do so. It would be bad if the Sky Wings mistakenly believed that Wu Ming was forcing Azrael. Arthas didn't tell you, so you might not know. I'm a god from another world, and I might need helpers from time to time. After all, there might not be any more wars in this world, so I wish to sign a contract with all of you. However, this won't be forced. Those who aren't willing can leave now. In a while, I will restore the bodies of those who aren't willing, and for those who are willing, I will establish a contract when I restore your bodies. With that, Wu Ming waited for the Sky Wings to move. The reason there would not be any more wars was that Wu Ming had decided to find a god that could replace him as the only god and forbid war in this world. This could be considered as taking care of the humans a little. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he realized that not a single Sky Wing moved. Wu Ming frowned as he looked at the Sky Wings. Thinking that he had not made himself clear, Wu Ming spoke again. Did I not make myself clear? Those who aren't willing can leave. My lord, we are willing. Nearly 10,000 Sky Wings said in unison. With nearly 10,000 mouths speaking at the same time, Wu Ming was given a fright. That's why I said, Lord Wu Ming, don't underestimate us Sky Wings, meow. Azrael looked at Wu Ming gloatingly and said. We won't disobey Lord Wu Ming's final order. Even if we do, will submit because of Lord Wuming's order, meow. I'll give you the right to challenge me. Live on and work hard to become stronger. Don't you have almost unlimited lifespans? Then, make killing me with your own hands your lifelong goal. This was Wuming's order. We can't follow you to another world, so we can't fulfill this order. What if you don't come back, Lord Wuming? Azriel was like a fox that had just eaten grapes, smiling at Wuming. Azriel was right. After all, Wuming was not a native of this world. Wuming had his own world, and he needed to go back. Although he would return to this world, he would not be able to do so many times. Besides, there are plenty of Sky Wings who have submitted to your spirit, meow. The Sky Wings were not idiots. Wuming had given them motivation and a goal to live on. At the start, many of the Sky Wings could tell. Now that they had calmed down, they more or less understood Wuming's words. With a series of reasons such as, I'll definitely fulfill this order, thank you for giving us a new goal to live on, and, Lord Wuming's words must be obeyed, the Sky Wings completely accepted Wuming's contract. Wuming smiled. That guy Artrius really has a bunch of awesome children. Even I'm a little jealous. Then, let's begin. Restore your bodies and contract. With that, Wuming raised his hand. Wait a moment. At this moment, an extremely pleasant voice was heard. Chapter 457. With that pleasant voice, a figure flapping its wings landed in front of Wuming. She was wearing the same clothes as the other Sky Wings, with socks of different lengths and colors. She was even wearing only one shoe. She had a long hem and a pair of small wings at her waist, which made one wonder if she could fly. She had orange eyes that leaned toward gold, and her eyes were filled with death. She had long pink hair that glowed with fluorescent light, and a halo that resembled a magic array on one side of her head, making her look extremely mysterious. Wuming could not help but sigh in admiration. They really were sisters. Azriel's clothes were similar to the girls', and aside from her heterochromatic eyes, her hair color being different from the girls', her halo being more complicated, and her face being a little different, Wuming would believe that the two of them were sisters. On the other hand, because the other Sky Wings had always been in the shape of children, Wuming could not tell how similar they were. Thus, Wuming chose a Sky Wing that was the same size as Azriel, and he began to compare them. However, there were a few things that caught Wuming's attention. The Sky Wing girl's figure was as graceful as an angel's, but her eyes were as cruel as a demon's, and her entire body reeked of blood. Although the Sky Wings were all 16 or 17-year-old girls, because of the war, they were filled with ruthlessness and death, and Azriel was no exception. However, the Sky Wing in front of Wuming had a more ruthless and bloodthirsty aura than the other Sky Wings. She was undoubtedly known as a god-slaying weapon. Wuming looked into her eyes. Although she was smiling, the death in her eyes was no less than the other Sky Wings. In fact, the other Sky Wings could not even catch up to her. This was an extremely dangerous fellow, more dangerous than any of the Sky Wing species present. This was Wuming's conclusion. Even more interesting was that she did not have the body of a child like the other Sky Wings. Instead, she had the body of a normal girl like Azriel. Little G, why are you only back now? Where did you run off to earlier, meow? Azriel had a look of exasperation on her face as she spoke to the Sky Wing girl known as Little G. I was attracted by the battle between Lord Arthas and Lord Wuming. Then, I was sent flying by the shockwaves of the battle. I happened to meet a strange human with a broken arm, so I played with him a little. The girl called Koji smiled sweetly at Azriel. Wuming, on the other hand, found some clues from these words. Based on her words, Wuming could tell that she had been drawn over while Wuming and Arthas were fighting. This meant that she had spatial abilities that surpassed other Sky Wing species. Otherwise, she would not have noticed the fight between Wuming and Arthas. Afterward, she might have been sent flying by the shockwaves of the spatial explosion, which was why she did not follow Azriel and the others to find Wuming. Furthermore, Wuming could sense that this sky wing was much stronger than Azriel's. Furthermore, this sky wing did not have the slightest hint of violence. Furthermore, this sky wing was able to leave a Bonteheim on her own accord. Furthermore, this sky wing had not transformed due to exhaustion. There was no doubt that this sky wing was unique. Lord Wuming, she is Gabriel, the final sky wing species created by Lord Arthas. She is the final product of an alien being. It can be said that she is stronger than any of us sky wings, and there is an example of her single-handedly conquering a superior race. Wuming immediately understood. It was no wonder she was so special. It turned out that she was an alien being created by Arthas. Under normal circumstances, the first and last products were both special. As the first product, Azriel had the authority to command the sky wings, while Gabriel, as the final product of an alien being, had the greatest strength. However, the fact that her body had not changed caused Wuming to misunderstand. Why was Gabriel called an alien being? It was because she was an alien being. As god-slaying weapons, the sky wings naturally had strict team assignments. Meanwhile, Gabriel did not have a team and acted alone. It was very likely because of this that Gabriel did not participate in the release of Pseudo-Godstrike. However, this did not surprise Wuming. Gabriel's lack of participation was very likely due to Azriel's orders. No matter how stupid Azriel was, she would not let all the sky wings fall into a weakened state. Gabriel was the backup plan that Azriel had left behind. Wuming's guess was not wrong. Due to Gabriel's stubbornness, she left a Bonteheim, and Azriel could no longer care about Gabriel. She brought a Bonteheim and all the sky wings to Wuming. After that, Gabriel found a Bonteheim and returned. Wuming did not think that Gabriel did not know about Arthas' death, but from her expression and aura, as well as the emotions she displayed, Gabriel did not seem too sad. However, Wuming did not pay attention to that. What Gabriel had just said concerned Wuming. You said that you met a human with a severed arm. Where is he? Wuming looked at Gabriel solemnly. Unsurprisingly, the human with a severed arm that Gabriel had met was Rick. Wuming had sent Rick directly to Lucia. Only the heavens knew how Gabriel had managed to get there. Even if she had been affected by Wuming and Arthas' spatial oscillation, could she have made it that far? The reason was simple. Gabriel had wanted to use her spatial ability to enter the space where Wuming and Arthas had fought, which was Arthas' war god shrine. However, a spatial explosion had happened at that time, and due to the instability of space, Gabriel had been sent away by the spatial oscillation. She should be considered lucky, but she had made it in time for Wuming and Arthas' spatial oscillation. She should be considered unlucky, but she had run into Rick, who had been sent away by Wuming. As the most god-slaying sky wings, what they loved to do the most was collect the heads of various races as spoils of war. They would not let their enemies off just because they were weak or strong. That was why Wuming was a little worried that Gabriel would make a move on Rick. Gabriel smiled sweetly at Wuming and explained, Wuming. Don't worry, Lord Wuming. Because he has the aura of your power on him, I only teased him a little and did not harm him. Indeed, Rick's severed right arm still had traces of mana leaked from Desireless arm. If not for a special method, it would take a few days for the residual mana to dissipate. Thank you for not attacking him. He's my friend. Wuming's tone relaxed, no longer feeling as oppressive as before. It's what I should do, Gabriel said gracefully. Gabriel then revealed a dangerous look. Then, Lord Wuming, let's talk about the contract. Chapter 458. For her to stand up at this time, there was no doubt that she had some objections to Wuming's contract. I heard that Sir Arthas has entrusted us to you. Since that's the case, I'll definitely abide by this rule. However, the contract you speak of isn't an ordinary one, Giliel continued in an elegant and pleasant voice. Giliel's meaning was very simple. A contract was not that simple. Please allow me to ask a question. If I sign a contract with you, will I truly become your subordinate? Giliel asked. Wuming naturally understood what Giliel meant. She wanted to ask whether this was a simple summoning contract or a true master-slave contract. If it was just a summoning contract, then the Sky Wings would only be summoned, but if it was a true master-slave contract, they might not even have the ability to resist after signing the contract. In serious cases, they might not even be able to commit suicide. However, the other Sky Wings did not seem to care about this. It was as if they were really weapons, as they quietly listened to the conversation between Wuming and Giliel. It's not a summoning contract but a master-slave contract. I can summon you through this contract, and you can transfer your power to me. I can also bestow my power to you. Currently, I know of these abilities. Azrael is an example, Wuming calmly said. He then began to transfer his power to Azrael. Bang! As if she had been cast by a red devil, Azrael's body erupted with powerful magic, creating a whirlwind that engulfed the surroundings. That's truly powerful power, Giliel said with a smile when she sensed that Azrael's power had increased by a large margin. Giliel could sense that Azrael's power had vaguely surpassed hers. However, you can be at ease. The contract will only be effective on creatures that sincerely wish to submit to me. After signing the contract with me, although I can't directly kill you, I can still control you to a certain extent. Of course, if you feel that this contract is too overbearing, you can choose to refuse to sign the contract with me, Wuming explained to the Sky Wings once more. There's no need to say such things, Sir Wuming. The Skywing sisters will definitely obey Sir Arthas's orders and treat you as their new master, so they'll definitely agree to sign the contract with you, Giliel said with a smile. I'm only asking because I need confirmation. After all, I have to ensure the future of my clansmen. If I've offended you, please punish me. Seeing Giliel's apologetic look, Wuming simply waved his hand. There's no need for punishment. You're not wrong. Then, Sir Wuming, would you be willing to fight with me? As if she had already expected Wuming's answer, Giliel smiled and looked at Wuming. However, the ruthlessness and deathly aura in her eyes became even more intense. Wait a moment, little Giliel. How can you be so rude to Sir Wuming, meow? Azrael frowned and said. After being strengthened by Wuming's power, she appeared extremely dignified. If only I could get rid of that last quirk, Wuming laughed when he heard that. I'm afraid that you wanted to fight with me from the start, Giliel. Indeed, after saying so much, apart from confirming the future of the Sky Wings, Giliel actually wanted to fight with Wuming even more. Although it's a little rude, Sir Wuming, I won't lower myself to fight someone I don't agree with, even if it's you who defeated Sir Arthas. Instantly, Giliel's eyes were filled with killing intent. Giliel! Azrael roared at Giliel. This time, Azrael did not use her pet name of Little Giliel, or her quirk of meow. It could be said that Azrael was already angry. You're quite to my liking. Then, let's fight. Wuming also revealed a smile, as if his interest had been piqued, and he looked at Giliel wantonly. Azrael looked at Wuming with some surprise, clearly dissatisfied with Wuming's willful answer to Giliel's willful request. Then, Wuming's Giliel arrived at Wuming's inherent barrier. This planet that had already been pierced through could no longer withstand another wave of devastation, so Wuming chose his own inherent barrier. Because it was the ability of Anzavulga's staff, the first 8 layers that were destroyed had not yet recovered, unlike the ordinary inherent barrier, which would remain intact after the magician activated it again. Although the 9th and 10th layers were quite narrow, Giliel did not say anything. It was better to say that for Giliel, any kind of battlefield made no difference. While the Skywing species waited patiently, several minutes later, Silent Wonder came out of the inherent barrier with the miniature Gopril in hand. So fast, meow. Azrael had a surprised expression. This opportunity is really careless. She used all her energy to release Heavenly Strike after a few simple exchanges, so naturally, it's going to end soon. After Wuming resisted Giliel's attack, Giliel, who had no energy left, could be said to have lost. I'm a little excited, but I didn't expect Wyrm Sama to be able to resist my heavenly strike. Gapril, who was being carried by Silent, wasn't embarrassed at all. Instead, she smiled proudly, as if she had won the match. Although I can't use most of my powers, I can still use magic. When Giliel used Heavenly Strike, Wyrm entered his magician avatar and used one sealing technique after another to directly seal Giliel's killing move. After all, in theory, in the face of a tsunami, you only need a flame countless times larger than a tsunami to evaporate the tsunami. Silent had made use of the principle of quantitative change leading to qualitative change. Relying on a magician's extraordinary use of magic sealing spells, he had sealed Jillian's moves. Fortunately, Giliel's Heavenly Strike was just a simple energy attack. If it was a noble phantasm, Wyrm would not be able to seal it, at least not now. It's really annoying, meow. In short, Kitsune lost, meow. Azriel turned around, and her face instantly became like an idiot. However, because Giliel was being carried by Wyrm, she did not see Azriel's face and said with a smile. Ah, that's right. Wyrm Sama got my approval. Wyrm, hurry up and let all of us Sky Wings sign the contract. Alright, let's do it as soon as possible. Wyrm also nodded. He had wasted too much time with the Sky Wings. However, Wyrm Sama, before that, can you give Kitsune to me for a while? Meow. Azriel turned around and looked at Giliel like an idiot. Hey! Senior Azriel, you're like this again. I don't want to be your pillow. Meow. Ha ha ha, it's still up to Master Wyrm. Meow, that's enough, you too. There are still so many people watching. Chapter 459. After that, Wyrm entered Vitality Incarnation and released his mana, enveloping all the Sky Wings. Immediately afterward, the Sky Wings returned to their girl forms at a speed visible to the naked eye, but thanks to that, Wyrm's Vitality Incarnation also entered a red alert state. After all, there were close to 10,000 Sky Wings. Fortunately, because it was not overloaded, the Vitality Incarnation was only used for a short period of time, so it would recover in a few days. After that, Wyrm also activated the contract ability of dependence, and all the Sky Wings accepted the contract without hesitation, including Gapril. By the way, Abendheim also accepted Wyrm's contract and evolved into Wyrm's guardian beast. After all, which god didn't have a divine beast by his side? Just stay on Abent. In a few days, this world will be brand new. Wyrm told the Sky Wings and was ready to leave. Is Master Wyrm going to see that human? Gapril suddenly asked. Yes, why? Do you want to go with me? Wyrm looked at Gapril. Yes, after all, it's too boring to stay here. Gapril smiled sweetly at Wyrm. However, this made Azrael feel helpless. Master Wyrm, if possible, I think it's better for you to take Gapril with you. First, she can't stay here, and second, with you taking a Sky Wing guard, you can let the other races know that you are our new master, meow. In short, it was a declaration of sovereignty. After all, many races had lost their gods. In addition, the battle between Wyrm and Artesio must have attracted the attention of other races, and there must be some races who wanted to take the opportunity to join Wyrm. After all, almost no one knew that the Star Cup was already in Wyrm's hands. Many of those secluded clans did not really want to retire. If they won the Star Cup for their own gods, they would naturally rise in status. Who didn't want status and power? It was just that they couldn't fight anymore, so they had to withdraw from the war. If there was a new incomparably powerful god that was left alone, they would definitely not mind joining him or her and starting to compete for the Star Cup again. I understand. Gapril, follow me. Yes, Master Wyrm, thank you very much. Because of Azrael's words, Wyrm was ready to take Gapril to a conspicuous place to show the sovereignty of the Sky Wings. Wyrm and Gapril flew in the sky at a leisurely pace. Master Wyrm, how different is your world from this world? Gapril suddenly asked. Wuming glanced at Gapril and found that her eyes were filled with a thirst for knowledge. It was no wonder Gapril couldn't stay. How could she stay with such a strong thirst for knowledge? My world. You can say that it's completely different from this world, Wuming said as he flew. Oh. Then, can you tell me? Gapril's eyes shone like a wolf who had seen meat. Of course, no problem. Let's talk about language first. If not for my innate ability that allows me to communicate with people from different worlds without any obstacles, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to communicate with you. Wuming had been to many places, but he had never encountered a language barrier. There was no doubt that this was a racial innate ability of the origin dragon. Now, Wuming and Gapril were communicating in the language of the sky wings. Every time he came into contact with a new species, Wuming could always subconsciously speak the language of that species and communicate with them. This could be said to be speaking the human language when you see the human, and the ghost when you see the ghost. After all, Wuming was born from the origin that gave birth to countless worlds and countless origin dragons, so it was reasonable for him to have this ability. But Master Wuming, you speak the language of the sky wings very fluently. Your innate ability is truly miraculous. In this world, because there were various gods, the creatures they created all had their own languages, including humans. Of course, there was also a common language of the continent that had come from who knew where, and it could be said that every species could understand it. Wuming suspected that it was because of this planet. As long as one was a native of this planet, they would definitely be able to understand the common language of the continent. Then, is there a unified language in Master Wuming's world? Gapril continued to ask. That's not the case. There are many countries and regions in my world. Just like this world, they were also invented by the races of each region. However, in my world, humans make up the majority, and other races are in the minority. Humans also have many races, Wuming began to explain non-stop, telling Gapril about the world of Type Moon. Yellow skin, white skin, and black skin. Humans can use magic. Magic? Generally speaking, it's not much different from magic. True ancestors and death apostles. I didn't think that your world would have fantasy breeds. Is this a character named Rune? Indeed, I can feel the tremendous power contained within it. Not long after, Wuming and Gapril came to an uninhabited forest. Along the way, Wuming told Gapril many things, and Gapril listened very carefully to the stories that Wuming told her. This greatly moved Wuming, and he even displayed the Lune runes for Gapril to admire. After all, anyone would be happy to be able to listen to him so attentively. Just as Gapril was drooling like an idiot looking at the Lune runes that Wuming drew in the air, she heard a bang, and the Lune runes all disappeared. Master Wuming. Gapril looked at Wuming with dissatisfaction. Without a doubt, Wuming had put away the Lune runes. Alright, we're done with our stroll. It's time to get down to business. Wuming would not forget about business just because he was having a good time chatting with Gapril. Yes. Then, Master Wuming, you should have summoned me earlier, He. Gapril then turned into an idiot again, letting out an extremely idiotic sound. Yes. I got it. Wuming bitterly smiled. He did not see any other skywing species being so curious. Could it be because Gapril was the final product? Wuming even began to suspect that the skywing species that had robbed the old capital of the forest fairies and stolen all the grimoires was Gapril. Gapril's thirst for knowledge was truly too exuberant. Shaking his head, Wuming no longer thought about this. He purposefully looked around before opening a teleportation gate and entering with Gapril. The spies of the other species hidden in the surroundings wiped off their cold sweat and quickly retreated. All sorts of probing spells were also dispelled. Chapter 460. In a cave, the water around him shimmered with the light of special ores. Rick was still wearing his tattered clothes from the forest god's attack. He sat on a stone bench uneasily. However, he was not alone. In this cave, there were other ghosts that Rick had chosen. Rick had asked them to rest in other caves. Rick wanted to be alone in this cave. They were all missing an arm or a leg, but fortunately, none of them were missing. Wuming's potion was indeed effective. None of them were crippled or had their skin fester due to the black ash, but they were still missing an arm or a leg. The ghosts did not always apply the black ash. They only applied it when they arrived at their destination and began their mission. This meant that they did not have any black ash on them when they were on their way. Putting aside the demons hidden on the continent, there were also those who were alone or hidden in the path that the ghosts had to pass through. Any single person of another race who accidentally discovered the ghosts was enough to pose a fatal threat to the ghosts. Coupled with the dangerous environment, it was a miracle that the ghosts were only missing an arm or a leg. There were no casualties. This is the possibility of being human. However, in the face of absolute power, we humans are still too weak, Rick said self-deprecatingly when he thought of everyone's efforts. Rick had been returning to this stronghold ever since Wuming teleported him back to Lucia. However, his luck was not good. He ran into a sky wing on his way back. How is that possible? Aren't the sky wings at war with the forest goblins and goblins? Rick was dumbfounded. Without the black ash, the sky wings had long seen through his human identity. Now, Rick was prepared to die. Oh, a special human. This feeling of facing death with equanimity. Are you prepared to die? As he had lost his right arm, Rick took out a dagger with his left hand and glared at the sky wing in front of him. Although Rick used his left hand to wield the dagger, it did not affect him much. To survive in such a world, it was necessary for both hands to master the way to use weapons. Not a bad eye. Looks like I'll have a decent spoil of war today. The Empyrean wing smiled. As someone who was very familiar with other races, Rick naturally knew that the spoils of war the Sky Wings were talking about were the severed heads. Well, it just so happens that I have something to do right now. I'll put your head on your neck first. It was as if the Empyrean wings were playing a prank on him. With a delighted smile, they took to the sky and left. Then, Rick slumped to the ground. Although Rick didn't know why the other party had spared him, the most important thing was that he had survived. I wonder how the Villo is doing. Rick began to worry again. No matter how he looked at it, the person who had taken his arm was not someone to be trifled with. Not to mention, Wuming had called her the forest god Canas. Although he did not know if it was the real forest god Canas, Rick knew that the enemy was not to be trifled with. The Earth's core has indeed been pierced through, so the Star Cup should have been released as well. Then, the Earth's crust shook violently last night. Could it be that the gods were fighting for the Star Cup? Rick frowned. Rick saw the Earth's core being pierced through, but he did not see who had obtained the Star Cup. Therefore, Rick guessed that the Earth's crust shaking was caused by the gods fighting for the Star Cup. Rick's guess was not wrong. Wuming and the Star Cup's consciousness were indeed fighting for their lives. It was inevitable that whoever won would obtain the Star Cup. However, if you think about it carefully, this is also beneficial to humans. No matter which god gets the Star Cup, the war will naturally end. However, Rick immediately shook his head. A god who can't ensure the safety of humans, possessing the Star Cup is equivalent to giving humans an unprecedented disaster. Rick sighed helplessly. I can only rely on you, Lord God from another world. After all, Rick still dared to prance around under the eyes of a god, but Rick really did not dare to snatch something from a god. It should be said that he could not snatch it. Humans without power could only lead the war to an end. If humans really had the power to change the outcome of the war, then humans would not be where they were today. Then I'm really honored, Rick. Suddenly, Wuming's voice sounded in the cave. Lord God. Rick looked at the source of the voice excitedly, but his voice came to an abrupt stop. It was not because of Wuming, but because a skywing species was following behind Wuming. Moreover, It was the skywing species that had let him go. In an instant, countless questions arose in Rick's mind. Why would the Lord God have a skywing species behind him? Wasn't the skywing species a subordinate of the war god Arceus? Could it be that the Lord God and Arceus worked together? Many questions filled Rick's mind. Seeing Rick's eyes constantly changing, Wyrm easily guessed his thoughts. Arceus is dead. I defeated him. Wyrm's words shocked Rick. To be able to defeat the war god who was known as the strongest in this world, did that not mean that this Lord God from another world was even stronger than the war god? Then, the skywing species behind you is... Rick looked at Jillian, who was still smiling. Now, the skywing species has already defected to my command. These words made Rick lose his composure. Let's put it this way. Just treat it as my reward for defeating the final boss. Wyrm smiled at Rick. How can there be such a reward for defeating the Demon King and subduing the Demon King's army? Rick roared angrily. Forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. Rick rubbed his head as if he had a headache, then looked seriously at Wyrm. Star Cup. How is it? Hearing Rick's words, Wyrm smiled, and then golden ripples appeared beside him. Seeing the golden ripples for the first time, Jillian showed interest and curiously stared at the golden ripples. Wyrm reached his hand in, then out again. In an instant, the cave, which was originally extremely dark even with the light of the ores, became as bright as the outside. The reason was the cup-shaped object in Wyrm's hand, which was emitting endless light. Without a doubt, this was the Star Cup. Jillian and Rick both looked at the cup in shock. This was the symbol of the planet's ownership. Although the two of them had no intention of becoming the planet's master, they could not help but care about the Star Cup. This thing was simply too beautiful. This was Rick's first thought. Rick was deeply immersed in the warm light of the Star Cup and did not speak for a long time. Chapter 461. So this is, the Star Cup. Rick said in a confused manner. Yes, this is the source of the gods' dispute and war, the Star Cup. The entire planet was engulfed in the flames of war. Countless lives were lost. The sky lost its light and was shrouded in darkness. The ground was covered in black ash. The cause of all this was the beautiful little cup that was glowing in front of him. The ownership of the planet. The throne of the only god. Now, this war can finally end. Rick clenched his fist and lowered his head. A few drops of tears rolled down his cheeks as he spoke in a choked voice. Looking at Rick in this state, Wyrm's Jillian seemed to have realized something. Her eyes were filled with thoughts. At the very least, you humans participated in ending this war. You were the victors from the beginning. Usually, only those who yearn for peace will get what they wish for in the end, Wyrm said to Rick with a smile on his face. Also, I believe that even without me, you can save this planet. The possibility of humans isn't some weak force. From the beginning, Wyrm had sensed endless possibilities from Rick. The feeling that Rick could end the war even if he did not come to this world lingered in Wyrm's heart. If Shiobi met Rick, he would most likely be influenced by Rick's inner feelings. With Rick's opportunity and the Kikai Seed's ability, the possibility of ending the war was quite high. Of course, since Wyrm was here, he would naturally choose to help. Wyrm was glad that he came. Otherwise, even if Rick's plan was perfect, he would still die in the end. The Star Cup did not allow non-gods to become the only god. Wyrm could feel the rejection from the Star Cup towards Rick and Gopril. It was as if they would turn into ashes if they were to touch it. Wyrm's hand was wrapped around it. Wyrm, on the other hand, was judged as neutral by the Star Cup because of the Root Dragon's power. The Star Cup would not allow Wyrm to become the only god, nor would it harm Wyrm. It truly treated Wyrm as neutral. But now, there's another big problem. Wyrm smiled bitterly as he lifted the star-holding cup. Wyrm started to explain when Gopril's big, Curious eyes and Rick's teary eyes looked over. Because I'm not a native god of this world, the Star Cup doesn't recognize me, and the Star Cup can only be inherited by the gods. In other words, whether it's a creation of the gods or a human, they can't control the Star Cup. Wyrm told them the bad news. Jillian wasn't moved. She wasn't interested in these things, and Rick's expression didn't change much as though he had expected it. You don't seem surprised? Wyrm asked. While I was waiting, I also guessed that humans might not be able to use the Star Cup. Furthermore, I didn't have any intention of obtaining the Star Cup, so I wasn't surprised, Rick said slowly. Besides, I originally wanted you to become the only god, although it's impossible now. Rick shook his head regretfully. The three fell into silence. Hey, Rick, have you ever thought about how gods are born? Wyrm suddenly asked. Facing Wyrm's question, Rick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began to ponder. My lord, isn't it because the elven corridor gave birth to a divine seed? Seeing that Rick didn't answer, Jillian spoke up. However, Wyrm smiled and shook his head. Of course, Wyrm wouldn't ask such a simple question. Otherwise, Rick wouldn't be deep in thought. What I mean is, why would the elven corridor give birth to a god? Is there a source beyond this? Jillian also fell into deep thought. She wasn't very interested in this kind of thing and had never thought about it before. She simply gave up after thinking about it for a while. If there were no god seeds, then there would only be one kind of creature in the world. Because only humans were born to live on this planet, the other creatures were all created by the gods. Wyrm's words gave Rick some idea. From what I know, every world has faith. If the gods rely on faith, they can become extremely powerful. Wyrm began to tell the story. Faith can provide the gods with endless power. The more people believe in the gods, the more powerful the gods will be. However, once the believers disappear, the gods who rely on faith will instantly fall to the bottom. This was basically the reason why the gods in the Type Moon world retreated. People began to understand the magic that could only be used by the gods, and it was Solomon who created the magic. People began to understand mystery, no longer held reverence, no longer believed, and slowly began to believe in science. As for the gods, they can also be born from faith. Wyrm's words shocked Jillian. My lord, do you mean that the divine seed is born from faith? Then, Jillian began to think. The divine seed was born from faith. If that was the case, before there were divine creations and gods, whose faith gave birth to the divine seed? Jillian looked at Rick. Without a doubt, the answer was humans. They had no power, no spirits in their bodies, and were extremely weak. However, they were able to play a role in ending this great war. Although in Jillian's eyes, humans were still insignificant, this war was just humans basking in her lord's glory. You should have thought of it, Rick. The humans' faith gave birth to the gods, and the gods created various races. Wyrm nodded, then looked at Rick. The forest god, the forge god, the war god, the doubt god, the ocean god. All the gods had their own duties. The war god was born from war, hatred, and blood. The forest god was born from nature, greenery, and plants. The ocean god was born from the ocean, various gods, and so on. Ah! Of course, I have thought of it. The thoughts of the foolish ancestors turned into a disaster for their descendants. How ironic. Rick clenched his fists tightly. At this point, he finally understood everything. Why were humans different? Why were humans without any special characteristics? Why were humans without gods? Why were humans so weak? It was all because there were only humans on this planet. Because of the human thoughts, this magical planet's mother gave birth to her younger brother in her own body. However, in the end, the younger brothers of the humans created various descendants, and the younger brothers ignored the humans as their elder brother in order to fight for the position of the family head. Or rather, they never thought of themselves as having an elder brother from the beginning. These humans were probably the servants of the family, the younger brothers thought. Then, the Earth's mother was scarred, and the only elder brother could not stand it anymore. He began his journey to end this farce of a family power struggle. What a crappy family drama, Wyrm mocked. Then, Wyrm looked at the disappointed Rick. Hey, Rick, we need a new god, don't we? Another sentence made Rick realize something. You mean? Chapter 462. Relying on the faith of humans to give birth to another god. Rick naturally understood what Wyrm meant. However, there was no god that could be born just like that. Even the other divine beings were born after who knows how many years. However, Wyrm shook his head. Rick, you're underestimating yourself. You're the leader of humans, a special human who could attract my attention. Although the human leader's words were a little absolute since there was no telling if there were other humans in this world, Rick had indeed attracted Wyrm's attention through the black origin mud in the star cup. It was because of his strong belief that Rick's voice could reach Wyrm's ears through the black origin mud. Haven't you realized that there's a god like that beside you? Rick's pupils instantly contracted when he heard Wyrm's words. The god of games. Rick remembered how he often played chess with that unknown existence when he was a child. Although Rick believed that the god of games existed, he didn't need to have such childish thoughts after becoming the leader of humans. Therefore, Rick never played chess again, nor did he tell anyone about the story of the god of games. It could be said that this was the first time Rick played chess with Shiobi and Wyrm in the old capital of the Forest Elves. The god of games, huh? Although it doesn't sound very reliable, I'll leave it to you, this world. Wyrm nodded, and then threw the star cup behind Rick's back. Rick didn't react in time. When he saw Wyrm casually throw the star cup, he didn't catch it. Gillyre didn't move either, and quietly watched Wyrm's actions. The ruined star cup looked as fragile as glass, and it was thrown by Wyrm just like that. Subsequently, the star cup did not fall to the ground as Rick had expected. The star cup floated firmly in the air as if it had been caught by someone. Then, a figure slowly appeared, turning from transparent to solid. This is... Rick stared at the scene in disbelief. She was wearing a green shirt, blue shorts, magenta shoes, and a jacket. There was a pink ribbon on the back of her jacket. She wore a checkered hat with a plum blossom logo printed on it. Under the hat, she had short white hair. Her cheeks were printed with hearts, and her left and right eyes had spades and diamonds respectively in her heterochromatic pupils. As expected of the god of games, his face, eyes, and even his hat were all pictures of poker cards, the god of games, a deity formed from your faith and your will. Wyrm explained. I'm Tetu. The god of games held the celestial cup in his hand as he hovered in the air, greeting Rick who was staring blankly at Tetu. The god of games, does it really exist? Rick was a little excited. Then, Wyrm mercilessly slapped Tetu's face. At the same time, he is also the weakest god. Outside the cave, Wyrm, Rick, Gillyre, and Tetu arrived. Ignoring the fact that Wyrm said he was the weakest god, Rick was still a little excited. This was a god who existed by his own will. Although he was born by your will, Tetu is the weakest god because it is only your faith. Wyrm explained as if he saw through Rick's thoughts. Although you're not wrong, can't you give me a little face? Tetu chuckled. Although Wyrm said he was the weakest, Tetu didn't care, like an optimist. Although what Wyrm said was the truth. Well then, I'll take my leave first, everyone. With that, Tetu flew into the sky. Tetu, who had ascended to the throne of the only god, was now preparing to repair this world. It couldn't be said that Tetu was trustworthy, but as a god born from Rick's faith alone, his way of thinking was still simpler than the other gods. At the very least, Tetu, who was born from Rick's faith, was trustworthy. Perhaps it was because his lifelong wish had been fulfilled, or for some other reason, but Rick was now staring blankly at Tetu, who was flying into the sky, as if he was possessed, without saying a word. At that moment, Gillyre spoke while Rick was still in a daze after Tetu left. "My lord, are you really going to give the celestial cup to the weakest just like that?" Gillyre was a skywing after all, and her mindset of respecting the strong wasn't that easy to change. Wuming, the strongest, had given the greatest spoils of war to the weakest, which made Gillyre very unhappy. But she had no choice. Since it was her master's will, she could only endure it. "After all, I can't use it either, can I? I only have one goal, and that is to help the humans of this world." Although the god of games is the weakest god, Tetu's feelings for humans aren't weak. Wuming smiled as he explained to Gillyre while looking at the sky. "Perhaps the mindset of respecting the strong has been deeply ingrained in your mind, but I still want to say that humans aren't weak." However, Gillyre still looked as if she didn't agree with that. Through the thoughts of humans, other gods were born. Are humans weak? Not at all. Gillyre then refuted Wuming's words. "But even so, my lord, humans are on the brink of extinction in this war. This is a fact that you can't refute." Gillyre first bowed to Wuming to atone for her rebuttal, before continuing. "Even so, in the end, the celestial cup was still obtained by a god born from the faith of humans. It can be said that humans have won this war." Wuming smiled. After all, the condition for humans to win was the end of the war, while the condition for other gods to win was to obtain the celestial cup. "I defeated Arthas. This is the result. I am the victor. Now, humans are the victors, and the victors are the strong." Gillyre then fell silent. "Humph, whatever you say, my lord." As if throwing a tantrum, Gillyre snorted and didn't say anything else. Wuming looked at Gillyre with a bitter smile, then said with a smile. "Well, you still have a long way to go in terms of understanding humans. I'm not asking you to have any desire to protect humans, I just want you to acknowledge other races. The mindset of respecting the strong isn't suitable for you who are my guardians." Yes, my lord." After ending the conversation between master and servant, Wuming began to admire the reconstruction of this world. Not created by anyone, not expected by anyone, not prayed by anyone, Tetu's voice began to sound in the sky. The nameless race that evolved from beasts to bipedal walking with their own consciousness and obtained intelligence, humans. Tetu's voice wasn't loud, but it was as if the entire world could hear him. "For such a race, I, as the only god, grant you a name. Humanity, race of humans." The moment the humans were given their names, the sky of this planet lit up. The dark clouds all disappeared, and the sun was exposed. Plants instantly covered the earth, butterflies fluttered among the flowers, and birds soared freely in the sky. The entire world seemed to be alive again. Not only that, but most of the terrain was also changed, and there were more chess pieces on the ground. Next, the exceed 16 races, who claim to have intelligence. "You will swear to the covenant as your worship, abide by the rules of the 10 covenants, and start a new game in this new world." "Well then, let's continue the game." Listening to Tetu's speech and looking at the land that was restored to life, Wuming smiled helplessly. "Well done, but all I can say is that as expected of the god of games. So, my lord, do you want the celestial cup back?" Gillyre egged him on. Well, looking at the tears of joy flowing out of Rick's eyes as he looked down at the land that was restored to life, Wuming turned to leave. "Since I'm not interested, I'll leave the rest to the players." Chapter 463. Wuming slowly walked on the land that was overflowing with life, admiring the scenery around him. The trees were lush, butterflies were dancing, and all kinds of small animals were coming and going. Birds were flying freely in the sky. Arriving at a highland, Wuming looked down at the plains in front of him and sighed. "You don't say, controlling the star cup is really like controlling the ownership of a planet. In just an instant, the entire planet changed. It was as if Tetu had entered an editing interface. He formatted the dying planet and gave it new life. At that moment, Shiobi, who was following beside Wuming, spoke. Shiobi. I like the current planet. Shiobi looked at the land in front of her with a happy expression. Wuming couldn't help but look at his sister, who was smiling so innocently. After Tetu reorganized the world, he set the 10 covenants. Wuming didn't pay attention to the content of the covenants, only knowing that they were related to the game. Wuming couldn't help but complain about Tetu again. As expected of the god of games. In short, the entire world had become a world where everything was decided through the game. This way, humans wouldn't be deliberately harmed. After that, Rick brought the spirits back to the village. Seeing her brother return safely, Crone was so happy that she hugged her brother and cried for a while. Wuming, on the other hand, quietly cancelled his clone and came to the village. After all, in everyone's eyes, the siblings Villo and Shiobi had been staying in the village all this time. By the way, during the time he stayed in the village, Crone came to Wuming many times. Of course, it wasn't what you imagined. Crone came to Wuming to find out what her brother was doing. Of course, Wuming deliberately avoided this question every time. After some time, Crone gave up on getting information from Wuming and turned to Shiobi. After spending so much time together, Crone understood the relationship between Wuming and Shiobi. A kind and capable brother and a shy and innocent sister who always hid behind her brother. In Crone's impression, Shiobi and Wuming had never been separated and were always together. Therefore, Crone thought that Shiobi must know something about him. After all, she was a child and it was easy to get information from her. That was Crone's idea, but reality slapped her in the face. Shiobi, who had been instructed by Wuming, was naturally feigning ignorance and not telling Crone. Although Crone wasn't happy that she couldn't get anything out of Shiobi after half a day, thanks to this, her relationship with Shiobi, they were like sisters. Thanks to Crone, Wuming, but Shiobi's, Shiobi. Even if Crone was willing to accept Shiobi after knowing her identity, it didn't mean that others were willing to accept her. Therefore, after a few days of recuperation in the village, Wuming decided to leave with Shiobi. He would let the image of a kind and reliable brother and a pure and timid sister be fixed in the hearts of Crone and the others. Wuming used the excuse of, Shiobi and I are going back to our hometown, and the current world is decided by the game, so there's no need to worry about safety, to leave with Shiobi. Wuming still remembered the scene of everyone sending them off. Crone hugged Shiobi and cried, while Rick and Wuming shook hands. Rick knew that once Wuming left, it was very likely that he would never see him again in this lifetime. Take care, Villo. You too, Rick. There weren't many words, nor were there any words of gratitude. With just a few words, the two of them let go of their clenched hands. Then, under everyone's reluctance and blessings, Wuming took Shiobi and rode the horse of this world that Crone and the others had given them and headed into the distance. After traveling for a while, Wuming released the horse and let it return to nature. Then, Wuming and Shiobi walked on the ground. After all, the two of them really didn't need any means of transportation. How does it feel to gain feelings, Shiobi? Wuming gently touched Shiobi's head and asked. Shiobi put her hand on the power furnace in front of her chest and slowly answered Wuming. Shiobi can't say. But, Shiobi is very happy, brother, is that so? That's enough, my sister. Looking up, Wuming felt the wind blowing against his face and said in a relaxed tone. I'm preparing to leave this world. What about you? Wuming asked. Shiobi understood what Wuming meant. She was abandoned by the Kikai seed and the possibility of her returning was not high. Therefore, Wuming wanted to ask if she wanted to go with him. Then, Shiobi shook her head. Shiobi is preparing to return to the Kikai seed and pass on her feelings to everyone. Shiobi stared at the pair of mechanical eyes. Although it was mechanical, it was full of charm and emotions like a living creature. This is going to be a tough road. Are you ready? Wuming once again patted Shiobi's head and exhorted his sister like an elder brother. Yes, Shiobi is ready. Shiobi will definitely let all the Kikai seed gain feelings, brother. Shiobi looked at Wuming with a smile. Through those eyes, Wuming read the firm belief. Wuming smiled and then activated the soul of words. A person with a supreme protective divine power. God protects him, the devil hates him, and no enemy can approach him. He is like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. Then, through his hand that had yet to move away from Shiobi's head, Wuming transmitted his protection into Shiobi's body. Feeling the increasingly powerful power in her body, Shiobi was at a loss. Wuming continued to increase the power of the protection. About half an hour later, Wuming stopped the protection. With this protection, even if Arthas revives and uses a divine strike, it will be enough to withstand it. Wuming let go of his hand that was touching Shiobi's head. Then, Wuming half squatted down and looked into Shiobi's eyes. With your brother's protection, you can rest assured and do what you want to do, Shiobi. Feeling Wuming's power in her body, Shiobi touched the core on her chest and said, "Brother, do you still have the thing that Shiobi gave you?" Shiobi asked. "That metal ball, right? How could I have lost it?" Wuming smiled. Then, he activated the golden ripples beside him. Wuming reached in and took out a fist-sized metal ball. He handed it to Shiobi. Shiobi took the ball and placed it on her chest. Then, the ball seemed to come to life and emitted light. Shiobi's core was visibly split into two, and half of it was sucked into the ball. Then, Shiobi removed the ball and handed it to Wuming. Shiobi has your power, so the core no longer restricts Shiobi. Shiobi has divided the core into two, and half of it has been stored in here. Brother, carrying her is like carrying Shiobi. But... Wuming hesitated. Logically speaking, as long as the core of the Kikai seed was not destroyed, she was not dead. Shiobi had given half of her heart to Wuming. This made Wuming feel flattered. This was simply putting her life in someone else's hands. Brother also said that the world is not dangerous now, and I believe in my brother. Shiobi looked at Wuming, her eyes full of expectation. She believed that Wuming could protect Shiobi's core. This was what Wuming read through Shiobi's eyes. Give me the heart, I will never let it go for the rest of my life. Shiobi too, with your brother's power, Shiobi will not let go of your brother. The wind blew, brushing the grass on the ground. The sun shone gently on the brother and sister on the ground. Everything was so beautiful. Chapter 464. Shiobi revealed Kikai's equipment and flew into the sky to leave. Wuming did not move, remaining on the high ground overlooking the land. My lord, are you leaving? With a spatial ripple, Gopril's voice came from behind Wuming. Gopril was a sky wing, after all, so Wuming had her avoid arousing suspicion and not appear in front of Crone and the others. And because the atmosphere between Wuming and Shiobi was just right, Gopril tactfully did not appear. Once Shiobi left, Gopril appeared from space. What? Are you excited because you can't wait to go to my world? Wuming half-joked. Well, a little. Gopril smiled, the wings on her back trembling, showing how unsettled she was. Alas, Wuming cruelly shattered Gopril's fantasy. For the time being, I probably won't summon you. Just obediently stay on Abant. How could it be like this? Gopril was like a deflated balloon, powerlessly slumping to the ground. This world has already become meaningless. Master, please hurry, and take me away. Gopril was like a canary in a cage, looking at Wuming with a pitiful gaze. That was because Te-Tu had turned this world into a game where everything was decided. That meant that there would be no more killing. This was hell for the Sky Wings, who loved to kill and snatch kills, as well as the god-slaying weapons. As a cute girl, it's not good to always talk about killing and fighting. You need to learn how to cultivate your character. How about this? Tell Azrael to give an order to all the Skywings that the new generation of Skywings is no longer a killing machine but a collector of culture. The current mission of the Skywings is to collect the culture and knowledge of this world. Whether it's to collect books or use magic to record them, gather as much knowledge as you can. The moment he said this, Gopro became interested. She had always liked all kinds of culture. By the way, after collecting the culture, the Skywings need to study it and learn the advantages of it. Don't be like bookworms who only know how to copy. Yes, my lord, your subordinate will do it right away, Gipro replied playfully, then fled into space and disappeared. Wuming smiled helplessly and shook his head. Then, Wuming said to no one. Aren't you going to come out and meet me? After all, I'm your benefactor who helped you ascend to the throne of the one god. After Wuming finished speaking, a child's voice sounded. Ha ha ha, are you leaving? Do you still need me to send you off? Tae-tu appeared in front of Wuming and laughed happily. It had to be said that after becoming the only god, Tae-tu could be said to be an omnipotent god. However, he could only be omnipotent on this planet. In any case, the current Wuming had no confidence in defeating the current Tae-tu's. If he were to leave this world, while he would not be completely useless, he would still be much weaker. At the very least, in another world, Wuming would be able to grind Tae-tu to the ground. There's nothing wrong with the celestial cup, right? Wuming ignored Tae-tu's joke and asked about serious matters. No, there's nothing left of that black origin soil you mentioned. If not for the fact that there are some traces left inside the celestial cup, I'm afraid I would have thought that you were lying to me. Tae-tu was like an optimist as he happily answered Wuming. Incidentally, Tae-tu was still lying down in the air, using his arm as a pillow. It's best if you be careful. If you get corrupted by that thing, we might become mortal enemies, Wuming warned. Ha ha ha, even if that happens, I'll only play games with you. I don't like fighting and killing. Tae-tu was not wrong. If Tae-tu was really corrupted by the black origin soil, with Tae-tu's spirit, the black origin soil would not be able to turn Tae-tu evil. It might even make Tae-tu an even more powerful good god. However, even if Tae-tu was a good god, he would still treat Wuming as an enemy. That was why the black origin soil was so frightening. If the black origin soil was allowed to corrupt all worlds, then Wuming would really become an enemy of the entire world. Forget it, I'm really an idiot for worrying about you. Wuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. Well then, I'll be leaving first. Help me take care of the humans, god of games. With that, Wuming's figure disappeared from where he was. Don't worry, I'm very fair, Tae-tu said with a smile, but that pink face of his was black no matter how you looked at it. And so, Wuming ended his journey in this world and returned to the dimensional tunnel. Once inside, Wuming was not in a hurry to head to the world of singularities, and instead flew out of the tunnel. Now, the flaws of this body could be seen. His authority incarnation had too many limitations and was not powerful enough. Even the divine blade of salvation that was one with Wuming was only a replica in this body, and was not as powerful as before. Therefore, Wuming decided to return this body to the furnace to reconstruct and evolve it. Wuming soon returned to the root, and nothing happened because Kalis was there. Lord Wuming. Kalis greeted from the head of Wuming's main body. You've worked hard, Kalis. Wuming said. You're too kind. Kalis replied, flattered. Wuming smiled and didn't say anything more. The relationship between the two of them was already beyond the point of needing thanks. Then, Wuming revealed the true form of this body, which was the body of the root dragon. Wuming looked at his main body, which was much smaller than before, and was a little troubled. So it's time to level up. Then, Wuming's consciousness disappeared from this body and returned to his main body. Wuming, who had returned to his main body, opened his eyes, and an indescribable aura filled the entire root. Then, the dragon horns on Wuming's head glowed, and the golden chains around him danced. If my main body encountered the Star Cup's consciousness, I might be able to kill it with one claw. Wuming felt his current strength and said confidently. Let's see which singularity Chaldea has reached. With that, Wuming's huge ruby-like dragon eyes turned golden, and something invisible flowed in his eyes. Not long after Wuming's eyes turned golden, Wuming's eyes turned red again. The ocean, huh? This should be the third singularity. So far, Chaldea had reached the third singularity, and it seemed that it was almost done. This was all because of Wuming's clairvoyance that evolved in his root. Wuming had just seen Chaldea conquer one singularity after another after leaving Winterwood City. The 100 Years' War, the City of Seven Hills, and Oceanus from Greek mythology. Although Wuming did not stay in Rick's world for long, it seemed that the flow of time between worlds was different. Chaldea had already completed 2 singularities, and the third seemed to be almost done. Well, I'll leave it to them for now. Through his clairvoyance, Wuming also saw the vampire that Wuming summoned for Olga Marie. She had contributed a lot on this journey. Not only that, but Gadatsi also met a lot of reliable servants. I'll level up my backup machine first. As he spoke, Wuming began to move his hands and feet on the huge dragon body lying beside him. Chapter 465. Inside the root of origin, Wuming had been upgrading his own body for some time. Because there were many things that needed to be upgraded, after Wuming came up with a general format, he put the body aside, and then channeled the power of the root of origin into the body, allowing it to be modified by the root of origin's energy. That's it for now. Wuming nodded the huge dragon head in satisfaction. Chaldea should have finished conquering the 4th singularity, right? How about I go to the next singularity and wait for them? Wuming thought, and activated clairvoyance again, spying on Chaldea and the others. Oh, the mastermind has come out early. How unbecoming of a big boss, Wuming said sarcastically. Then, Wuming looked around. I don't think the root of origin will attack so coincidentally. I'll go meet that magic king. With that, Wuming flapped his wings and flew out of the root of origin. But then, traces of black matter appeared outside the root of origin. In the 4th singularity of the M-Moon world, under the magic fog city of the underworld, in an underground space similar to Winterwood City, 4 huge pillars of flesh with eyes released powerful magic power, wreaking havoc in this underground space. If Wuming was here, he would definitely recognize this thing. The demon god pillar that Lev once transformed into was such a disgusting thing. The residual magic power in the space proved that a few servants had just left. In front of the pillars of flesh, many people stood there. Wuming knew most of the people present, such as Gadatsi, Matthew, Pamilia, Mordred, and the others. They were all nervously watching a blue-haired servant with the body of a child talk to the mastermind controlling the pillars of flesh. Opposite them stood a white-haired man in ancient Israeli clothing. Just by standing there, his powerful magic power increased the pressure on everyone. The demon god pillars were arranged behind the man like stars surrounding the moon, and the identity of this white-haired man was already beyond doubt. The only one who could control the demon god pillars was that demon king Solomon. Having had enough of the boring conversation, Solomon shook his head helplessly. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I have to say that human weapons are just like humans. Both of them are hopeless. Upon hearing this, Matthew immediately raised his shield and stood in front of Gadatsi. Even though his legs were trembling, Matthew still firmly guarded Gadatsi. Instead, it was Pamilia who went against her usual arrogance. She had an unusually calm expression and didn't say anything, as if she was waiting for the right moment. Oh yeah, are they going to attack us? The blue-haired man said in a low voice, not at all afraid that he was about to leave. However, this did not mean that others would not be angry. Tisk, you really make people angry, Mordred said irritably. She then raised the Emperor's sword in her hand and prepared to attack. That being said, even she couldn't guarantee that she would be able to take a blow from the Magic King. The servants who left before were the examples. Destroy them, demon god pillars. Solomon just finished speaking, and the 4 meat pillars that were wreaking havoc in this underground space began to dance. Immediately, when everyone was at their wits' end, there was a strong fluctuation in the space. A huge dragon claw appeared in this underground space. As if catching an earthworm, the 4 demon god pillars were uprooted and then directly crushed. Bang! The demon god pillars didn't even leave behind a wail. All of them turned into pure magic and dissipated in the air. Gadotsi and the others looked at the huge dragon claw that was still there with a dumbfounded look. Obviously, they didn't react. However, Pamelia relaxed, as if the reinforcements had come. Mordred said in a displeased tone after sensing the restlessness of the bloodline in her body. "TSK, we're too late." Mordred complained, but her tone had already relaxed. Then, when Gadotsi and the others were wondering who saved them, Solomon opened his mouth. "I didn't expect you to come here with your original body." "Same here, didn't you also come here with your original body?" Wu Ming's voice came into this space. This voice is Assassin Senior. Because he used his original voice, Matthew easily recognized Wu Ming's voice. Immediately, the huge dragon claw turned into magic and landed on the ground. Wu Ming, wearing assassin's uniform, appeared in front of Gadotsi and the others. "Assassin?" Gadotsi shouted excitedly and threw herself on Wu Ming's back. Yes, I'm here. Also, a girl should be reserved, don't throw yourself on others so easily." Gadotsi nodded and obediently came down from Wu Ming's back and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. This couldn't be blamed on Gadotsi. The horror brought by Solomon was not something a little girl who had just become a magician for less than half a year could bear. It could be said that if it wasn't for Matthew's ability to protect her, Gadotsi would probably have mental problems now. "That's because you're always reliable, assassin," Gadotsi smiled. It seemed that Wu Ming left a strong impression on Gadotsi when he burned and polluted Winterwood City. "There should be a limit to how much you can ignore me." Then, the Magician King roared out angrily. After comforting the frightened Gadotsi, Wu Ming looked at Solomon. "You just wanted to kill them, right? The mastermind behind the burning of human rights." Because everyone already knew that the other party was the mastermind behind the burning of human rights, they were not surprised that Wu Ming knew about it. "I didn't want to kill them, after all, they are no threat to me, but those people over there have your aura. I can't endure it any longer." Solomon said violently, almost to the point of roaring. Solomon's eyes were blood red at this moment, and his mouth was cracked open like a monster. Black threads also appeared on Solomon's body, and countless magic power was released as if it was free. Wu Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. Taking a closer look, these are not threads, these are all small black mud. Because of the black mud, Solomon had a strong killing intent towards Wu Ming, and this killing intent implicated Gadotsi and others. "Then do you want to do it now?" "I don't mind." Wu Ming became serious, and began to release magic power from his body, forming a situation where he was equal to Solomon. But in an instant, Solomon calmed down, and his eyes and mouth returned to normal. "I really forgot myself. These things are powerful, but they affect my mood too easily." Wu Ming took a closer look, and the black mud on his body disappeared, or rather, it was sucked back into Solomon's body. "You can really restrain yourself. Among the enemies I've met, there's not one like you." Everyone who was related to the black mud would not let Wu Ming go, as if they wanted to kill him. Then, they would be killed by Wu Ming. If they could calm down, they could still have a big impact on Wu Ming. Just like the consciousness of the Star Cup, if it could leave first, and then give the Star Cup to Kaina's, then it would be the only god by using Kaina's body, and Wu Ming in that body would not have the ability to beat it. After all, even the weakest Teto became the only god. Wu Ming did not dare to say that he could beat him. From this, it could be seen that the Magic King was able to suppress his desire for Wu Ming, and could be said to be the ultimate big boss. "That's all for now, I'll bring you some good stuff at the next singularity." After saying that, as if afraid that his desire for Wu Ming would flare up again, the Magic King left. It was good that he left, this made Wuming worry less. After all, if they fought, Gadotsi and the others behind him would be a burden. Then, Gadotsi and the others, who had been silent all this time, began to ask questions. Chapter 466. Hey, who is assassin, to be able to force Solomon to retreat? Do assassin and Mordred know each other? Why do I feel like Mordred knows you, assassin? Do you know that, Solomon? I feel like there's a grudge between the two of you. Assassin. Let's stop for a moment. Wuming covered Gadotsi's mouth with a headache and stopped Gadotsi from asking any more questions. Wuming could understand the excitement when there were so many unknowns and someone who could answer them, but it was still better to let Gadotsi calm down. Then, Matthew said weakly from the side. Senior assassin, let go of Senior first, Senior is about to suffocate. Wuming looked at Gadotsi, who had turned into a mosquito coil, and quickly let go of the hand that was covering Gadotsi's mouth and Gadotsi's nose. I'm saved, thank you so much, Matthew. Gadotsi looked relieved and touched Matthew's little head. This kind of action made Mashu's face blush. On the other side, Pamela flapped her little wings and came in front of Wuming. Then, why did thou come so late? Pamela asked Wuming with a haughty expression. You stinky brat. That guy isn't someone you can question. Mordred, on the other hand, had an unhappy look on her face. Huh? What right do thou have to control me? Oh, you're so protective of this guy, could it be that thou and this guy have an unspeakable relationship? Pamela was angry at first, then started to tease Mordred. It seems like the lesson from before wasn't enough. Mordred raised her royal sword and looked like she was going to fight with Pamela. Thou is the one who hasn't been taught a lesson. Pamela showed her small canine teeth, not to be outdone. From their conversation, Wuming deduced that the two of them might have fought, and it ended in a draw. Their relationship is really good, Wuming said faintly, no longer caring about the two. That being said, the two of them have caused a lot of trouble. At that moment, the blue-haired servant spoke. My name is Hans Christian Andersen. Just call me Andersen, great unknown being. It's rare for Mr. Andersen to be so serious, Matthew said in surprise. It's just a necessary greeting. Don't make me sound like those two guys over there. Andersen shook his head helplessly. In the end, Mordred and Pamela were still facing each other. At this moment, Roman's voice came from Gadotsi's wrist. Although I know that everyone has a lot to say, let's hurry up and retrieve the Holy Grail. This underground space is about to collapse. Because of the confrontation between Wuming and Solomon, the originally unstable underground space became even more unstable. Sure enough, as soon as Roman finished speaking, the underground space began to collapse. Doctor, you really have a crow's mouth. Matthew complained, quickly ran to the location of the Holy Grail, put down his shield, and began to retrieve the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail has been retrieved. I'm sorry, assassin, although I would like to talk to you, we have to hurry back to Chaldea. After all, once the Holy Grail was retrieved, the singularity would begin to restore itself. If they didn't leave, then they would be killed by the self-correcting power of history. And now, Andersen and Mordred's body began to dissipate. After all, the Holy Grail was retrieved. Hey, I'll settle this with you next time. Mordred said to Pamela fiercely. I'll wait for thee. Pamela also replied, not to be outdone. I can finally leave. With him here, there's nothing for me to do. Goodbye, everyone. Andersen sighed with a melancholy and rejoiced expression, then accelerated the speed of his body's disappearance. Humph. Mordred looked at Wuming, then snorted and disappeared as well. So dishonest, Wuming smiled. Then, I'll start the ray shift now. Everyone, get ready. Roman said through Gadotsi's wristwatch. However, Wuming laughed mischievously. Then, how about I go with you, Chaldea, control room. As soon as Pamela came back, she returned to her small room with the excuse that she was tired and needed to rest. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Wuming, the three stood together in front of Roman, who was dumbfounded. "I didn't expect you to have such an ability," Roman said gloomily. Wuming did come back with Gadotsi and the others, but he did not use the ray shift. Instead, he relied on his own ability to fly back with Gadotsi, who had been turned into ray shift. Now, although Wuming had not reached the state of omnipotence in the use of time and space, he was almost there. Because he had stayed in the route for a long time, Wuming was almost reaching adulthood. It could be said that if Wuming wanted to fight Solomon just now, he would have a great chance of winning. "Well, if I ask for the reason, you should know." Wuming's eyes seemed to see through everything as he stared at Roman. "Ha! Ha! Is that so?" Roman wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said nervously. "I won't be in a hurry to leave." "Tachika, Matthew, you two go back and rest first," Wuming said to Gadotsi and Matthew. "Let's go, Senior. Senior needs to rest." "Oh. Okay then, see you later." Gadotsi, who saw that Wuming wanted to talk to Roman alone, left with Matthew. Although there were other staff in the control room, Wuming only needed to use a little trick to let them hear his conversation with Roman. "Initially, I felt that there was something wrong with you. Now that I see it, I understand the truth," Wuming said in confusion. "I'm just a human now, a human who is working hard to restore humanity." Roman didn't feel nervous as before and calmly answered Wuming. "If that's what you want." Wuming shrugged, indicating that he didn't want to talk about it anymore. "Actually, I want to ask something about you," Roman said after a moment. "Is it about why I only showed up now? Or do you want to ask if I will follow Tachika and the others to attack singularities?" Wuming could almost guess what Roman wanted to ask. After all, there were only a few questions he could ask. "Both, and if possible, I hope you can help us," Roman said seriously. "Of course," Wuming answered without hesitation. "Huh?" This surprised Roman. "Didn't I say before that although I have my own enemies, they are generally the same as you?" Then, Wuming smiled. "And, I also like humans." Chapter 467. About half an hour later, Gadotsi and Matthew, who couldn't wait to have sex with Wuming, went to the control room together. Why is Assassin missing? Doctor, do you know where he went?" Gadotsi asked Roman, who was working at the control console in the control room, when she saw that Wuming was missing. "Could it be that Senior Assassin went to Chaldea alone?" Matthew asked in confusion. After all, if he wasn't here, it was very likely that he had gone to other places in Chaldea. After all, Chaldea was quite big. No, Assassin suddenly remembered something and left Chaldea. Wuming and Roman knew each other very well for some reason, so Wuming told Roman his name. Assassin left?" Gadotsi said rather gloomily. Although Matthew didn't say anything, her sullen expression revealed her uneasiness. Then, Roman smiled when he saw the expressions on the two girls' faces. "But Assassin told me to tell you that he will help you at the next singularity. Then, you can have a good gathering." "Really? That's great. I have a lot of questions to ask Assassin," Gadotsi said happily. After all, things like the relationship with Mordred, the mysterious dragon claw, the ability to suddenly appear, the ability to appear without the help of the Holy Grail, and so on were all very attractive to Gouda. Not only that, but Gadotsi also paid more attention to the super-mysterious identity of Wuming after meeting Stheno on the invisible island of the second singularity and Urieli on the third singularity. Of course, this was also closely related to the deep impression that Wuming left on Gadotsi in Winterwood. Strictly speaking, Wuming was the first servant that Gadotsi had ever met that was gentle, reliable, powerful, and wise, unlike any other servants. Like a big brother next door, Wuming constantly attracted Gadotsi's attention. Since that's the case, let's quickly start the strategy for the fifth singularity. I'm ready, Gadatsi said in high spirits. You're so motivated. Roman was surprised. Matthew also looked at Gadatsi in confusion. Although Gadatsi usually didn't hate the strategy for singularities, she didn't like it either. It was the first time that Matthew saw his senior so motivated. After all, we met assassin he, Gadatsi scratched her head embarrassedly. At that moment, Wuming's little fangirl was born. Although you're ready to attack the next singularity, unfortunately, we haven't completely locked on to the next singularity, so we'll have to wait a little longer. Roman and the other staff members were also very concerned about the singularity. After all, it was the future of mankind. However, they still hadn't fully grasped the location of the singularity. By the way, before Wuming left, he left some information about the next singularity. However, because it was in a hurry, the information he left behind only played a supporting role. After all, Wuming's method of searching for singularities was completely different from Chaldea's method. Although they were similar, they could only play a supporting role. This was also why Chaldea and the others were able to lock on to the fifth singularity so quickly as soon as Gadatsi returned from the fourth singularity. By the way, you didn't disturb the director, right? Roman asked quietly. Gadatsi quickly waved her hand. No, after all, the director just started. What's the word again? Yes, she's in seclusion. We didn't disturb her. Yeah. Matthew nodded. This allowed Roman to breathe a sigh of relief. Ever since Olga Marie returned to Chaldea, she had assumed the position of director and was in charge of the overall situation. However, it seemed like the heavens were playing a joke on her. After returning to Chaldea, Olga Marie was unable to perform the ray shift. This made her, who was preparing to go to the first singularity with Gadatsi, stay in the frame like a fool after the ray shift was performed. In addition, although Pamilia was not very obedient, at least she was helpful to Gadatsi and the others in attacking singularities. Therefore, Olga Marie decided to let her follow Gadatsi, while she stayed in Chaldea to command. But after a long time, Olga Marie found that Roman was completely capable of taking over her position, and there was also the second servant summoned by Chaldea to assist him. Therefore, Olga Marie decided to study the third method. She had nothing to do, and the third method was close at hand. Olga Marie was not a pedantic person, so she did not hesitate and directly began to study the third method. She had no choice but to study it. Otherwise, she could only be the spirit behind the Holy Grail, unable to escape for the rest of her life. Since then, Olga Marie would go into seclusion from time to time to study the third method. Coincidentally, a few days ago, Olga Marie just went into seclusion, and now, Wuming came to Chaldea. The director is very persistent about assassin, Sama. If she knew that assassin, Sama came to Chaldea, I don't know what the director would do. Matthew said embarrassedly. One had to know that Sundara's temper tantrums came without warning. Olga Marie had lost her temper several times because of her dreams about Wuming and her dissatisfaction with Pamilia. Basically, Gadatsi and Matthew were in the singularity, so only Roman suffered, which made Roman have a headache. It was a sad story. It's better not to tell her, you're right, yeah. While Roman and the others were chatting, Wuming encountered a small situation. At the door of the root, his home, Wuming looked at the entrance of the root where a lot of black mud had poured in, and there were still countless black mud outside. He was unusually depressed. He had only left for a short while. How could his home be raided? Left with no choice, Wuming temporarily cut off control of his main body and let Kalas move his body a little in the air. He instantly flew to the backup machine inside the root. Opening his ruby dragon eyes that were identical to his main body, Wuming looked gloomily at the black mud that was beginning to erode the root, trying to take root again. He shook his head with a headache. Fortunately, I held back. Otherwise, it would really be over this time. As Wuming spoke, he activated the power of the root all over his body, and the safety device inside the root was activated. Zap zap zap. In an instant, countless lightning flashed, and countless black mud were destroyed and evaporated by the lightning produced by the root. However, the black mud was still a product of the root, and since it had taken root inside the root, it was not that easy to destroy. Roar! Then, Wyrm controlled his body to fly up. His whole body emitted the lightning of salvation mixed with the power of the root, and kept sweeping away the black mud of the root. The black mud of the root was not to be trifled with either. It immediately turned into huge waves that swept toward Wyrm. Even Wyrm had to take these two attacks seriously. "I'll definitely guard my home obediently from now on," after muttering in his heart, Wyrm seemed to have made an important decision. Using the power of the root and lightning all over his body, Wyrm charged into the waves of black mud and exploded. Boom! The explosion affected all the black mud inside the root. Even the root, which did not have a fixed form, seemed to be shaking. That's right, Wyrm self-destructed. With the thought of, "You're ruthless, I hate you more," Wyrm directly used himself as the starting point to detonate the lightning of salvation mixed with the power of the root, completely washing away the black mud of the root. The entire root seemed to have been washed clean by Wyrm's self-destruction, and looked very clean. Even the entrance of the root was blown open by the explosion. At this moment, Wyrm's main body in the outside world opened his eyes, flapped his wings, and flew into the root before the black mud of the root could reassemble. Chapter 468. Having returned to the root, Wyrm was like an emperor who had ascended to the throne once more, wiping out all the rebels who had taken the opportunity to cause trouble outside. The root regained its peace. Wyrm had a headache as he collected the mana residue left behind by the backup machine's self-destruction, preparing to use the chaotic nature of the root to reassemble it. After all, this was the root, and it was something that could be done. And Wyrm's headache wasn't because of that, but because of the self-destruction. Because Wyrm had used the backup machine just now, Wyrm had sacrificed the rook to save the king, and had perished together with the backup machine's body and the black soil of the root. As it turned out, the effect was outstanding. However, self-destruction wasn't something that could be done casually. Wyrm's body just now wasn't his main body, and therefore self-destructed without any pressure. Then, he was hit by the spiritual impact left behind by the self-destruction. In all kinds of novels, TV shows, movies, and anime, people would see all kinds of people self-destructing. Some were villains who self-destructed, some were supporting characters who self-destructed to protect the main character, and some were protagonists who self-destructed to kill the big boss. Basically, the result was death. Even if there were resurrections, those who self-destructed would be as spirited as gods because of the invincibility buff they received when they were resurrected. However, Wyrm had just used the backup machine's body to self-destruct, and then switched back to his main body to attack the black soil of the root that had revived from the ashes. Therefore, Wyrm suffered a spiritual backlash after the attack. I'm guessing that guy must have tipped off the black soil. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Wyrm held his head with his dragon claw in discomfort as he continued to collect the residue of his backup machine. The guy that Wyrm was talking about was the Magic King, who had indeed said, "You actually came here with your main body." It was probably then that he had informed the black soil of the root, and that was when the mindless black soil of the root attacked. As expected, that guy is the real enemy, Wyrm said with a serious expression. His previous enemies were all affected by the black soil of the root, and were killed by Wyrm as if they had lost their minds. But this time, the Magic King suppressed the spiritual corruption brought by the black soil of the root, and could even affect the black soil of the root to a small extent. If he could really command the black soil of the root, Wyrm's nest would have been conquered by the black soil of the root, and Wyrm would not have to come back to save the situation. In short, the Magic King was Wyrm's strongest enemy. Wyrm, ouch, ouch, ouch. Wyrm's, his dragons, and his dragon mouth, and again, to hold his head, to his head. The black soil, the root, the root, the root, the root, the root to the root, the root, the goddess he Wuming the magic root, the black, the god of the root, the root. Of the root, the root, the root, the root W, the of the root, the root, the root. His hands did not stop moving. Wuming continued to fiddle with his backup computer. But, since I'm ready for this feast at Hongmen, if I don't do it properly, I'll be sorry for my identity. As if he thought of something, Wuming smiled joyfully. Fifth singularity, United States. On the streets of the capital, countless strong soldiers patrolled with long spears. Even the outskirts of the city were filled with these soldiers. If Wuming was here, he would have covered his face in embarrassment. Because these soldiers looked exactly like Wuming, but these soldiers seemed to have put on old makeup, and they looked like they were in their 30s or 40s. Furthermore, Wuming is an eternally 18-year-old dragon of origin. How can he be old? How can he be old? The White House, Washington. Countless soldiers with Wuming's face were stationed everywhere in the White House, including the streets outside the White House. The security was so tight that not even a fly could get in. In the small square in front of the White House, a queen surrounded by soldiers walked to the front. The queen wore a white fluffy cloak. Because it was deliberate, it could be clearly seen that the queen's body was only wearing white clothes that covered her chest and lower body. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a bikini. The queen didn't care about revealing her skin as she swaggered to the small square. Then, the queen took out a golden cup from her cloak. Holy Grail, please fulfill my wish. With just a sentence, the golden cup called the Holy Grail emitted a bright light. Then, a magic circle appeared in the center of the small square. It was used for summoning. Along with a burst of light, a figure covered in pure white armor appeared in the magic array. May I ask, are you my master? Maeve? The figure looked at the queen holding the Holy Grail with a slightly confused expression. Yes, my little Sai, my king, it's me, Queen Maeve smiled sweetly. Inside the White House, Wuming sat on the president's throne, looking at the charming woman in his arms with a headache. That's right, that white figure was none other than Wuming. Because he wanted to cheat, in addition to the Holy Grail's enticement, Wuming had arrived in a pure white armor that covered even his head. Wuming was inside the root. After seeing that the backup machine was almost repaired, he handed the task of repairing the backup machine and upgrading it to Collis. Meanwhile, he locked onto the Singularity's location and relied on the root to send a servant's body that he had set up in advance. Wuming's main body fell into a deep sleep again. He did not dare to leave again. If the house was raided again, the unrepaired backup machine would not be able to help him. Poor Collis was assigned by Wuming to guard the house again. However, Collis was also very happy because Wuming's main body was always with her, so it was not difficult for her to accept it. Then, Wuming opened his eyes and saw Maeve, as well as soldiers with Wuming's face. God knows how awkward it was to see all the soldiers' faces turn into his own. It was like going to the street and finding that everyone's face had turned into his own face. It seems like this is what it's like to have a common face. Ahem, fortunately, Wuming was wearing a helmet, so even if Maeve was in his arms, she could not see Wuming's awkward face. Wuming watched as Maeve pulled him into the room and made him sit down. Then, Wuming watched as Maeve sat in his arms, rubbed against him, and laughed happily. Only now did Wuming realize what was going on. Because Wuming was thinking about the soldiers with Wuming's face. Ahem. In fact, Wuming already knew that Maeve wanted to take him to this empty room to do something embarrassing. After all, it was Maeve, of course. Wuming, who retained his virginity, refused. In the end, she just sat in Wuming's arms and rubbed against him. Long time no see, Maeve. No matter what, it was not wrong to say hello first. Wuming and Maeve had indeed not seen each other for a long time. And then, that's all you want to say, Maeve smiled charmingly and said while hugging Wuming's neck. Now, Wuming only had one thought in his mind. And that was, Maeve, do you feel uncomfortable with this armor? If you feel uncomfortable, then come down. Chapter 469. Of course, Wuming wouldn't say that. If he said that, with Wuming's understanding of Maeve, she would definitely answer that way. It's very uncomfortable, then little sigh, take off your armor, how about we do something with love, ahem. Back to the topic. I only traveled to a lot of places and didn't have time to go back, Wuming said seriously. Oh, is that so? As long as you're not fascinated by other vixens, Maeve said with a smile as if she saw through Wuming. Wuming's heart skipped a beat. If it's Leah, she's not a vixen, she has the blood of the red dragon, but now, little Sai only belongs to me, the king who belongs to me. However, Maeve was more reasonable than Wuming thought and didn't care about other things. Let's not talk about this for now. Maeve, the source of this singularity is your holy grail, right? Can you give it to me as compensation? When everything is over, I will use the holy relic to summon you. At that time, you can do whatever you want. Wuming was now putting his virginity on the line for the singularity, and he was afraid that Maeve wouldn't agree. As the first woman who truly loved Wuming, Wuming has her own principles. She won't do anything to force a woman who loves her. It has to be said that Wuming was affected a lot when he was a knight of the Round Table. But this was pardonable. Wuming really stayed in Camelot for a long time. Wuming came there when King Yusef was still in good health, and he was forced to leave when King Arthur unified the British Isles. If it weren't for the fact that he was a scammer in the Sumer area for a long time, Wuming would probably have taken root as a knight of justice. However, Wuming didn't think it was bad. Thanks to being a knight of the Round Table, his character was still quite noble. At least if he had the ability, Wuming would help humans through difficulties. Sure, just as Wuming was distracted again, Maeve answered Wuming. Immediately after, Maeve took out the golden holy grail from her bosom and handed it to Wuming. You gave it to me so easily. Wuming couldn't believe it. After all, this was the holy grail that maintained the singularity. Strictly speaking, it was a treasure that was more valuable than Maeve herself. I believe in Little Sai as long as it's Little Sai's request, I'll agree. Looking at Maeve's smiling face, Wuming felt that he was quite despicable. Taking advantage of women was not something a knight should do. By the way, the armor Wuming was wearing right now was the one he wore in Camelot. After all, Wuming had cheated quite a lot. In addition to Maeve's wish, Wuming was no longer the Connaught Silver Dragon Cylinder. Instead, he existed as a spiritual base that should not have existed. As long as Little Sai is happy. By the way, there is more than one holy grail in this era. With that, Maeve's smile changed in Wuming's eyes. Damn it, so she gave me the holy grail because she had nothing to fear? Forget it, you keep it yourself first. Wuming said weakly. Yes, Maeve smiled slightly and put the holy grail back into her bosom. Explain the current situation to me. Then, Maeve explained to Wuming what happened in the American continent. Because of the Magic King's plan, the American continent was chosen as one of the singularities. Therefore, there was naturally a demon god pillar that held the Holy Grail and served the Magic King. After that person awakened the consciousness of the demon god pillar, he used the Holy Grail to turn this place into a singularity. Then, he used the Holy Grail to summon Maeve. After handing the Holy Grail to Maeve, he left directly. After that, Maeve summoned Wuming's cyborg soldiers from her blood at lightning speed and directly occupied the capital of the United States, Washington. Because of the influence of the suppression, the Holy Grail also summoned a servant to fight against it, but because it was no match for Maeve, it was directly defeated by Maeve to the west of the American continent, while Maeve occupied the east of the capital, Washington. Just like that, the United States was divided into two parts, east and west. Logically speaking, the fifth singularity should have been like this. However, the Magic King, the mastermind behind the burning of humanity, suddenly jumped out, threw down a few more holy grails, and left after saying a few words. Let this place become the battlefield of the mythical war. These were the words left by the Magic King. Since then, several unknown forces inserted themselves into the East-West Division War, and the American continent became truly divided. Wyrm, accompanied by Maeve, looked at the map in front of him and carefully observed it. Originally, the entire United States should be divided into two parts, East and West, but now, on the map of the United States, it is divided into 5 parts. The eastern part of the United States with Washington as the center, the Appalachian Mountains including the area to the east, this is Maeve's camp, represented by white. The entire Great Lakes, as well as the southern part of the Great Lakes, including Chicago, St. Paul, and a small part of the surrounding plains, this is the territory of the unknown enemy who holds the Holy Grail, represented by yellow. The entire Mississippi Plains, the entire plains is the territory of the unknown enemy who holds the Holy Grail, represented by red. The entire Rocky Mountains, the Missouri River, and the Southern Mountains, this is the territory of the unknown enemy who holds the Holy Grail, represented by green. Finally, the westernmost Cordillera Mountains and the western coast, this is the territory of the servants summoned by the Holy Grail to deal with Maeve, represented by black. According to Maeve, the summoned servant was a lion head, and she didn't pay attention to its real name. It has to be said that this lion head servant is still miserable. Including Maeve, there are a total of 4 forces that hold the Holy Grail, and this lion head servant was squeezed to the most difficult terrain in the westernmost area. And now, he can only be said to be relatively lucky. That's right, relatively lucky. It stands to reason that the other Holy Grail forces can completely annex Lionhead, but they didn't do so. The Green Holy Grail forces in the Rocky Mountains, which is closest to Lionhead's territory in the Cordillera Mountains, didn't annex Lionhead, not because of mercy, but because they didn't have the opportunity to deal with Lionhead for the time being. In Wyrm's view, the Green Holy Grail forces that are close to Lionhead and hold the Holy Grail forces are fully capable of eliminating Lionhead forces. However, because the other Holy Grail forces are watching in the dark, it is easy to be attacked, so the Green Holy Grail forces didn't do anything to Lionhead. Because there are 3 forces that hold the Holy Grail, I directly gave up the territory in the west of the Appalachian Mountains and retreated to the east. I let the soldiers temporarily watch them fight each other. It was rare for Maeve to be serious as she analyzed the situation to Wyrm. And this map is roughly made by me according to the connection between the Holy Grail. Although it is not too detailed, it can still be used as a reference. After all, there is a connection between the Holy Grail, and it is not impossible for Maeve to sense the position of the enemy Holy Grail holders. Then, Wyrm, who had a headache, was just about to rub his eyebrows, but he realized that he was still wearing his armor, so he put down his hand. That is to say, whether I want to fix this singularity or rule this singularity, I have to take the Holy Grail of the other 3 Holy Grail forces, right? That's right as expected of my little Sai, but I don't want my little Sai to suffer. In fact, I originally wanted to unify this country and then summon you, but those enemies are really too difficult for us to deal with, so I summoned you. Maeve said, hugging Wyrm's armored arm. Come on, let's start the war to unify the country, little Sai. Then, Wyrm prayed for Chaldea and the others. Tachika, Matthew, you're on your own. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.